We're live. This is one epic event. The purpose really is to make a better tomorrow. My name is Garry Kousoulou. With massive privilege, I'm going to introduce Charles Appleby, who is the founder of No CO2 and whose brainchild this was. Charles.
Well, thank you everyone for joining us on this really special day for Earth Day 2020. Thanks for joining us. The theme of this is Climate Action Summit. Garry says it's my idea. Actually, it was Garry's inspiration, this was, because last week Garry ran an event. It was 12 hours with about 20 speakers. And Garry, tell me how many hits did you get on?
We're close to 40,000, and it would be amazing for us to eclipse that with today, because Earth Day is trending in the whole world. We want to make a difference. We want to empower those that are watching and make you feel that you're part of this too. So we will take any comments that you're going to send us from Facebook or within this Zoom call.
Okay, so but it's 40,000 not just from the day, it's from the recording as well. So as Garry said, I'm the founder of No CO2, that's n0co2.org. We plant trees and plant enough trees and you can go carbon neutral, which is what's really important here. So basically we're hosting this special Climate Action Summit. As I say, Garry, you were very much involved in inspiring this. So Garry, also a key part of this is the coronavirus and lockdown and where we are. So Garry, let me ask you the question. What is it that you're actually doing different in lockdown? What are you doing different here, Garry?
Well, since I've met you, Charles, you've had a big influence in my life on empowering me to make good choices. So if I'm to go and collect some milk or those essential things, I'm getting on my push bike and I'm cycling there. I tell my children that they mustn't leave the lights on. I'm more aware of the lights. I'm more aware of the choices that I buy when it comes to packaging. I have changed my utility supplier from fossil fuel to a much more wind power. So I save money too, so that was a bonus.
Well,
I'm
Garry,
much more conscious of what I do.
Garry, I saw the picture of you on Facebook riding a racing bike with a 12-kilogram bag of barbecue charcoal. Garry, you know, at the moment it's very, very important to stay safe, and if you are cycling, stay safe and stay extra safe if you're carrying about a ton of charcoal. Garry, not a good idea.
Being Greek Cypriot, I must say happy Easter to all the Christians out there, whoever you are. Hope that you're safe. But for sure, that's part of the Greek culture that we barbecue at Easter. And I couldn't be without having enough coal, Charles. And so I'm going to pass that back to you. Have you found that you've done anything different in lockdown in this coronavirus environment that we have?
Well, for me, it's really been working with you. It's been the inspiration to get onto Zoom webinar. You know, we did some calls like this before. We had a phone line to California. We had a phone line to Paris. It was okay, but it's not the same. So this is you know, working with Zoom webinar, using this as a charity or business tool is amazing, and definitely I will be using this in the future. It was a real pleasure, Garry, to spend 2 hours.
You're one of the superstars of my summit. It was very popular because what I found is that the community that cares about our environment it wants to increase its reach. But you spoke to a whole new audience that didn't realize about sustainability and the choices that they can make a real difference. So I applaud you, and I acknowledge you, Charles, for your passion. And it's only your passion that drives this forward. And I'm starting to see there's things on social media. This is a free event, and all we charge really is for you to like, share, comment, spread the news of how we can empower others and to make tomorrow a better place for the earth to be in.
Thank you, Garry. So just on a technical point for people, yes. I mean, some people are really experts on Zoom and some people aren't. Now, with Zoom, am I right in thinking that you can, if you're on Facebook, so say you're watching this on Facebook Live, if you press the Facebook Live button, you can actually share with other people while you're here. Yeah, is that right?
That's correct. And I'm going to put on here the, if you wish, we can hold up to 100 people in this Zoom call, and you can be even more intimately involved with the conversation. But we'll be monitoring throughout the call what's happening. So right now we've got 16, 20 people, and it's growing. 20 people, 25 people. 2 comments already. Let's see what's been said. So Joy says, I'm in the same conscious, and she appreciates the local outdoor parks, especially hilly fields where she lives, and I would never take our environment for granted again. Thank you, Joy.
Fantastic. Okay, Garry. Well, look, let's get down to what today is really about.
Yeah.
So first of all, it is Earth Day. So there's a lot going on Earth Day. It's a really important time, and the theme is climate action. So it's a chance for us all to think about the importance of the climate. There's been an awful lot on the news, which stopped sort of a couple of months ago, but there's been a huge amount on the news about climate change, but people have still been pretty confused about what to do. So secondly, you know, we are at this very strange time of coronavirus, and basically coronavirus does impact on a lot of the things that people are talking about. We're going to have a great conversation a little bit later about is coronavirus a game changer for climate change? It could be, it may not be. I mean, there's people there who have got friends and relatives who are affected. There's people being affected economically with their jobs, and really, if you are in this situation, you've got friends and relatives and economic problems, then please do focus on those first, because that is critically important for you. But if you have other people who are at home, they've got some time, if you are in that situation, do please join us. Please join us, and today is all about making a difference. So
we have a gentleman or a lady. Exit coal now. Let's plant trees and stop coal power plants. Unite together, we can stop climate change. So thank you for that comment. We'll try and read out as many comments as we can. We can't interrupt the panelists as they're in a flow, but I certainly will be making sure that everyone is just on that. Joy, thank you. You're so lovely. You are sharing, and I appreciate that. And Mr. Cole out there, whoever you are in your alias, I hope that you share, like, comment as much as you can.
Fantastic. So the third thing is really today is about helping people. It's about helping people find out what they can do about climate change. So there's a lot of people out there people are pretty confused about climate change. I mean, I certainly was when I started off on this. I was very confused by all the science and the messages and things. It just wasn't clear at all. People are feeling disempowered. They're feeling hopeless about things, and then on top of that, there's coronavirus, which means that, you know, maybe things are going to be even more difficult. So, you know, there's a little comment there, stop coal. That's one of those things that is really, really important. It's a part of it. It's a part of what can be done, and it's a great example of people sharing here with others of what can be done and what makes a difference. Now, as Garry said, we are live, we're online, we're going to be on here until 9 o'clock or a bit later. So there's plenty of time still to share about this, share on Facebook, share the live, share by email, however you do, just give people a call, whatever you need to do to tell people about this and encourage them to join in and see what's going on.
I've got a couple, we run a tight ship here. We're going to try and run to time, but I've got 2 minutes spare to actually ask Charles what his intention is for this today. So when we finished, what would be your ideal scenario? Could you paint that for us in a couple of minutes?
Okay, well, where I'd like us to be, Garry, I'd like us to have really raised people's attention, raise their inspiration about what they as individuals can do, even though people are locked in or finding it a bit difficult. So finding some things out of today that people would actually feel they can do. And as part of the whole thing, I mean, this is part of this huge Earth Day event. You know, the original Earth Day was 20 million people in 1970 participated in the US. And this was about 10% of the US population. Now, things have moved on. We're not actually allowed to go out and demonstrate at the moment. But to do a similar thing, be part of this huge Earth Day thing. So we here, everyone here is doing our bit, the presenters, people who are participating, everybody do their bit. So we actually make a difference, and we come away from today inspired to do something different in our lives.
That's right, but one of the solutions is planting trees, and that's something that's your hook. That's what you love to do. Charles, we've got a few minutes before our first speaker at 25 past. Jeremy is going to come in. Can you tell us a little bit about what you want to do and how actually simplistic it is to plant trees?
Well, let's just start back 2-3 years ago, Gary. I mean, I was like a lot of other people. I was really confused by the science. You know, the scientists just weren't putting across a clear message. I was really unsure what was going on in the world with climate change, and what certainly I was really unclear about what to do about it. But a couple of things started to become clear, and one of them was that really, if we were going to achieve anything, then we need individuals involved. It's people who make the difference. It's people who influence the politicians. So the politicians really, I mean, they do listen to people. If enough people say something, then I believe they do listen. And so it's going to come down to individuals. It's not all going to be done by government saying, look, you know, you lot need to do this. It just doesn't work like that now. So we all need to be involved. So that was the really key thing. And then I looked at the sort of options, and there was organizations out there saying, you know, write to your MP and stuff. And I felt for me, this wasn't action oriented enough. I really do like people who are working to stop deforestation. I think that's critically important. But at the end of the day, I felt that for me, there was real resonance. It really resonated for me, the idea of planting trees, planting additional trees which actually remove CO2, and those trees
behind that, Charles.
And every tree it's planted. I mean, we're not planting 1 or 2 trees here. We're planting thousands of trees, and basically every chunk of trees that is planted, it actually secures that part of the earth. It's a part of the earth that had no trees on it, and you know, I've planted myself, my wife, we each planted 3,500 trees. Okay. And those trees will protect, each of us will protect an area which is about 40 meters by 80 meters of earth. And those trees that area of earth will have been planted hopefully with mangroves. Those mangroves will replicate. And the task of planting, so you know, it's low cost. The small amount of money you're spending or donating to plant trees, most of it goes to providing a livelihood for people in extreme poverty. So every 100 trees you plant, it creates a day's paid work. So it's a really great deal for us all, Gary.
So we're supporting not only a family, but we're supporting the earth as well. The mangroves do grow very quickly and can become effective at neutralizing the no CO2. So perfect. It's a perfect situation.
Absolutely.
So let's say you're watching this now and you think, right, how do I go about that? I would love to plant some trees. Could you talk us through the process, Charles?
Sure. So take a look at the website. So it's www.n0co2.org. That talks to you about what's going on. It invites donations. So the formula we've gone with, I mean, there's a number of ways of doing this, but what struck me as really important is to link the number of trees planted and the CO2 they remove to the amount of CO2 we're creating. So in the UK and a lot of Europe, on average, people are creating about 7 tons of CO2 per person per year. So the big lorries that go around the high street delivering food, those lorries typically weigh 30 tons or more. So that one of those fully laden, that's the weight of CO2 emissions for a family of 4. So what we're inviting people to do, if you'd like to, is take a look at the website, think about making a donation for yourself, for your partner, for a friend, or whatever. And so that donation, the average to remove 7 tons of CO2 requires 1,750 trees. And that comes down to £6 a month for 3 years.
A bargain.
I
can give you some update. I love these kind of statistics. Already we've reached 300 people. We've only been speaking for a few minutes. I know Jeremy is in the green room. He's waiting to come on. We're going to bring him on in a minute. Can you give us a rundown of the rest of the evening? What have we got to look forward to? And
well, we've got some.
You can dip in and out. We're not trapping you here. This is a free-flowing, very empowering show. So, Charles, what have we got to look forward to?
Gary, we've got some really, really great presenters today. So, Jeremy's going to talk about the what people can do for very low cost. He's working for Citizens Advice Bureau. It's a great place to be to understand this. Then we've got Stefan Savarese is the president of Saving Our Planet, and he's going to be talking about what people can do. And then we've got a very, very exciting conversation at 6 o'clock where we've got Councillor Donna Stimson, who's the lead on climate change at the Royal Borough of Windsor and Maidenhead. And she's going to be talking about climate change and what local authorities and boroughs can do. That is really important because they're a big multiplier. I mean, they're a massively bigger organisation, and they can do so much more than individuals and charities can do. So you've got them. So Gary, are there any talks here that you particularly want to?
All of them.
Sessions you particularly want to focus on?
I am a geek. I love knowledge. My medicine is learning, and what more beautiful thing genuinely can we do than learn about our environment and in improving things? And I just love making tomorrow better. I want to be an improvement, me and my children, an improvement on yesterday. So,
better day, great.
Jeremy, I am very impressed with your bookshelf, sir. Another studious individual. If you take off your microphone, we can hear you. Yeah, there he is. Yeah. So I'm a stickler for sticking to time. You are on in a couple of minutes, but it's always nice to just softly introduce you and join our chat.
Thank you.
Hi, Jeremy. Welcome.
Charles.
Great. So we're just talking about the other presenters, Jeremy. I don't want to miss out on them. We've got Jenny Edwards coming on at 5:30. So Jenny's going to be talking about a very different subject. She's going to be talking about connecting to nature in the period of lockdown. So this I think is going to be an important session for basically what people can be doing that's different and coming out of this at the end very differently maybe as people. And then another session we've got later on, we've got Sue Hindle from the International Association of Human Values. Now they've got very, very specialist skills in picking up the pieces after disasters. So whatever it is, whether it's volcanoes, tsunamis, floods, any of these things. And what we're going to be talking about is we're going to be talking about how basically under climate change there's going to be more and more of these situations arising. And we can talk both to Sue and Jenny as well about their thoughts on what people can do at the moment if people are feeling stressed and overwhelmed by the situation with coronavirus and lockdown. And then we've got the session on carbon pricing as well. We've got the impact of population, and then we've also got what big business can do. So we've got a load of stuff to choose from. The full listing is on the No CO2 Facebook page. So please, at the top of the posts in that page, please take a look at that and to select the events that you like to join in. And don't forget, you can share this now. You can share it. Tell your friends and contacts about it to let them know that things are coming up that are of interest to them. Okay, so Garry, back over to you.
Fun is the live element. The fact that we don't quite know, none of this is rehearsed at all. All the speakers have come on and given up their time, which we are very grateful for. But as the questions come in, I'll find the appropriate time to come in there and ask. So if you have this burning question, there are no stupid questions here. Whatever it happens to be, please get involved. Jeremy, you're a couple of minutes till you're on officially. I have to ask you about that bookshelf. It's very impressive. What's it full of?
Well, it's full of a lot of history, actually, more history than anything else. But my background is I've worked in trade associations, public relations for most of my working life, including for energy interests. You might call them bad in energy interests.
The big F, fossil fuel.
Fossil fuels, yeah. Oil heating was my one of my interests, and I've had a long conversation with Charles over this whole dilemma about how you get the climate change message across and how you actually make it real for people, because I don't think that's really been achieved to date.
No.
Yeah. Well, Jeremy, let's ask you the question. So obviously you're in your family are in lockdown like everybody else. What are you doing? What are you doing differently in lockdown that you weren't doing before?
Well, I'm not nearly so economically active, and I'm quite enjoying it. I mean, I'm an old geezer, so it's not so bad for me. But I mean, I'm not using the car. I'm hardly going shopping at all. I'm not going to restaurants or pubs. And I actually am quite enjoying it. I mean, if I was younger, it would have had a more catastrophic effect. So I think there are interesting sort of portends as to how we might be able to live in a more sustainable way through this lockdown experience. And that is extremely important.
Right. Okay, well, the subject we're talking about is basically we're talking about coronavirus. So, you know, absolutely, we're talking about coronavirus not from the medical aspects, because we've got that on the TV and radio the whole time. What we're talking about is this very, very interesting subject of is coronavirus a game changer for climate change?
Charles, I'm going to leave. So then, leaving you both on the screen. Colleen has just said she hasn't been in the car for nearly 3 weeks. It's great. Thank you, Colleen. Carry on watching. I am now jumping out. You'll see me again somewhere about 10 to 5, and I'll be introducing Stefan and Rob. So, guys, I'll be watching from the wings.
Okay. Thanks, Garry. Right. Okay, Jeremy. So, the impact of coronavirus. We've there's been a lot of discussion about the impact of coronavirus on all sorts of aspects of life. The one we're talking about today is specifically the impact on the impact of coronavirus potentially as a game changer for climate change. So, what's your take on this, Jeremy?
Well, I think there are reasons why it might be a game changer. There are reasons why it won't be a game changer. My personal opinion, and that's all it is I think it probably will not be. But let's go through some of those. And
yeah, sure.
People listening to this might
let me try and disagree with you. I normally do, but anyway, you start.
Go on.
You start.
Yeah. Okay. The reasons why it could be is that it shows what governments can do with the willing acquiescence of their populations. And so, you know, everybody pressing for government measures, you know, the COP22 or, you know, the UN things, which haven't been happening, it shows the government can do it. The second thing is that the whole phenomenon of controlling this pandemic is by sort of lots of little measures which shut it down. And there is a nice parallel here with climate change, as much as if the whole world does lots of little things, we know we can tackle climate change. So I think there's something that might go click in people's minds if they sort of think about it. And the third reason is that people have been motivated by fear. That's why we're an acquiescent population. We worry that we're going to get it, particularly if we're older. We worry we're going to die. So if the threats of climate change become real, and in the West, or in the affluent West, you know, that may be at some time off, I think that shows that something can happen. So there are three reasons why I think this pandemic is good for the climate change activist movement. Okay, well, let's focus on these. The one about fear. You know, yeah, I agree. People do have fear. I think we have a real fear. You know, you see these, you think things about people's situation every day. Okay, but why? The question for me then is why are people not seeing the risk from climate change? Because the impact of climate change is not just going to be on 1, 3 or 5 or 10% of people who are being, you know, very badly affected by coronavirus. It's going to affect everybody in the world, and they're going to affect people massively, because we're going to have sea level rise, we're going to have worse storms, we're going to have crops are going to be destroyed. So, you know, why is it that people aren't seeing the severity of this impact that's going to hit the lives of people increasingly over the years, and particularly their children? Well, I think there are two reasons for that. And I can only talk as a UK citizen, but I think I talk for all UK citizens here. We're not talking about dying in the next few months. Me personally dying in the next few months. So climate change is not talking about that. And secondly, of course, the whole movement has overpromised. It's kept on telling people, and I think you mentioned earlier on, we've been going on this for 30 years, but in fact, our everyday lives haven't changed very much in the United Kingdom because of climate change. I know there are scientists are saying that things are changing, and I've just been sunbathing this afternoon in April, which I may not have been able to do 30 years ago, but it hasn't actually hurt my life in any way. So I think you've got two very good reasons why the fear factor is not working, and also people are thinking, well, they've been telling us that for ages, and so on. Well, I felt over the years, I know a bit about how government works, but I'd never until the last month or so heard about this Scientific Advisory Committee, SAGE. So this committee of science experts, I mean, myself, I would have said on climate change is not necessary, because the UNFCCC at the international level, the UN and the IPCC, this body of scientists, the UN has done all this work. But if it's necessary for the UK to do our own analysis of it, then the obvious thing for me that comes out of this is that basically this scientific committee needs to be filled up with the appropriate experts and contrarianists, and to discuss it and come to a view about the importance of this for the UK. I mean, particularly since the UK is going to be hosting the next COP meeting. Well, Charles, you don't actually need that, because we've got climate change legislation through the Climate Change Act 2008, or was it 9, set up the Climate Change Committee. And Britain, or Parliament, has imposed upon government enormous responsibilities about cutting CO2 outputs. So, you know, there are lots of scientists doing that. What is the difficulty we've got? And I've mentioned this to you before. Something like the fuel price escalator, which could start discouraging some journeys, you know, by putting the price of fuel up, is very politically unacceptable. You know, this goes across everybody. And so, you know, politicians balk at this, they won't do it. So I don't think the mechanisms are lacking in the UK. But what I do think is when it comes to the crunch, you know, like Macron discovered with the yellow vests in France, you know, when you're hitting poor people living in rural areas, you get a popular upsurge.
Jeremy, look at what's different. Look, this appeared through the door, okay? So coronavirus, right? So, you know, at the drop of a hat, just within weeks, the government machine has gone into action and it says coronavirus, stay at home, protect the NHS, save lives. Now, the government is telling people that coronavirus is dangerous and they need to take some action about it. Now, you know, on climate change, why hasn't the government publicity machine and public safety, why isn't it telling me and everybody else the actions I need to take on climate change? No wonder people aren't so bothered about climate change, because the government hasn't told them that it's dangerous.
It isn't dangerous. I mean, it's not dangerous in the way that coronavirus is dangerous. I mean, they were talking about, you know, we're already looking at 20 or 30,000 deaths, aren't we, in the UK, probably? But, you know, the original projections were looking at 200,000 deaths. And, you know, within the next 6 months. I mean, you know, climate change is not in that league. And you've got to look at this from the man in the streets perspective. You know, people like you, Charles, and the climate activists, if I can put it that way, and they may account for 5% of the population, and I'm perhaps one of them, but we are not the man in the street. That's the point we've got to get over here. And so the government's not going to waste its money and paper putting something out like that. They're trying to control a pandemic, which that bit of paper helps do, to something which is not saving lives in the direct way they're hoping to do.
Yeah. Well, clearly, Jeremy, the pandemic it's immediate. It's an immediate crisis. Which I absolutely don't disagree with that. So, you know, it's immediate. It needs to be dealt with, and for international reasons, and the WHO arguably was late declaring the pandemic. Arguably, the UK was slow in responding to it, as they might do. But the difference with climate change is this, as I see it, is that, you know, we know that we've got 10 years, or less than 10 years, we've got maybe 9 years to really do something about climate change, which is going to make a difference. But the difference is, it's going to take all of those 9 or 10 years to build the infrastructure necessary to do it. Otherwise, within 10 years, it's like saying to you, Jeremy, within 10 years, there's a certainty that you will be flooded. And we all know that once people are flooded, it basically probably wrecks their business, it wrecks their lives and the rest of it. So in 10 years, it's going to take 10 years to do that preparatory work. If we don't do that work, then you and other people, you will be flooded, and that's the imperative of it. Okay, you're not going to die next week, but the future of your children, once your place has been flooded, it's a massive problem.
Yeah.
We have greetings from El Salvador. A gentleman called George. He makes a good point. Thank you, Charles and James. Fear can move from transform mindsets, but now we have to tackle other issues. Feeding 7 billion people. Fear in this case is not an issue, but rather survival is. Can this pandemic offer an opportunity to relate warning messages about global warming?
Yeah, well, Jeremy, that's what I'm saying. So you take this question.
Yeah, I mean, I want to just run through 2 other reasons why I don't think it's going to be a game changer, which may...
Okay, great.
We've mentioned the fact that the fear is not imminent, okay? I think the other difficulty you've got here is that the pandemic has demonstrated at the moment a complete lack of real international cooperation. I mean, comparisons between how Gordon Brown and others led the dealing with the financial crisis 10 years ago to how we've dealt with this pandemic has been really dreadful, partly because of the lack of American leadership, I think. But, you know, climate change has to have international leadership, and that's why, you know, the UN is so much center stage here. And I think one of the reasons that we're not going to see a great push when the pandemic has died down is that international leadership is quite flaky. I mean, the UN has done a terrific job after the disaster of Copenhagen to sort of pull together a consensus, but now they're getting down to the really nitty-gritty stuff about each country committing various targets, and that's proving much more difficult to negotiate. So, you know, I'm just saying that the international leadership is a component here, and hopefully, I mean, you know, the UN or others, America in the future post-Trump, may be able to provide that international leadership, or it may come from China, of course. I mean, that's another interesting scenario. So that's one thing. And the other thing I think we really got to come back to here is, what are we going to want to do? I can only talk in a UK context here. When the pandemic has gone away and the threat, the fear factor has gone, people are going to want to get back to a new normal. You know, this is the great phrase we're talking about. And what that means is people want to go back to work, they're going to want to go back to the restaurants and the pubs, they want to go back to shopping, although maybe much more online. You know, how human beings have this way of wanting to go back to what they were comfortable with. And of course, you know, that's exactly the sort of thing which is at odds with a lot of the lifestyles that the climate change activists are wanting to promote. And so the final point I'd make, why I'm against...
Hold on, Jeremy, just before you get onto that, I think it's pretty important. I mean, for me, you know, tackling climate change is not about stopping people going to restaurants, stopping driving their cars and doing stuff. For me, a lot of this stuff will be as similar to what people are doing now. So people will have transport, people will do things, people will go to restaurants. What will be different is that the subtlety of it will be different. So, for example, you may end up not tomorrow, because a lot of people aren't happy to give up beef and lamb, but people can adapt. I mean, I've adapted to having much less meat, so it's something that people can adapt to. Yeah. For transport, people will have an electric car. The people who I know have got electric cars, very positive about them. And then when that car becomes self-autonomous driving in the future, people think, well, why on earth did I waste all my time and effort driving around the countryside when I can get a computer to drive around for me? Yeah, so I think that, you know, I'm not saying life will be completely different. We definitely, I agree with you, we will have a new normal. But in terms of, is life going to be radically different in the future, specifically because of climate change, then it doesn't have to be. You know, heating, transport, all of these things can be done in a different way. So with, I mean, this is where you come in with green electricity. You know, Garry gave the example of him switching to green electricity. When you switch your item on the switch, what's the difference between having green electricity and between that and having high carbon electricity generated by gas? What do you see as the user? What's the difference?
Yeah, I mean, I'm with you with a lot of what you're saying, Charles, but the to throw back to your own argument, you know, you're saying we've only got 9 years to put these things in place, and a lot of that putting things in place is probably not going to get done. So we're going to be looking at a more, I mean, I would suggest that we've got to look at different sorts of lifestyles if the climate change scenarios, which we're all fearing, are going to come about. Now, there is a point of view, of course, that we'll do things slowly and the threat will slowly recede. I know it's not held by CO2 and saving our planet, but I mean, there is a point of view about that. The thing will...
Jeremy, you have a fan in Kathy Moss. She said that, Jeremy, comments on reducing consumption, not driving, shopping less, as a means to tackle climate change is spot on. Would love to hear him or somebody comment on how that kind of pandemic behavior can be embedded long term. And then for a balanced view, we've got the Citizens Climate Lobby UK. They're saying, well done to you, gentlemen. Sorry to correct, we don't have 10 years to do the prep work for emissions. In 10 years, we have to slash that down. So there's two balanced views there.
Great, thank you. So Jeremy, do you want to take your question or do you want to move on to your third point?
Well, I'll just, my third point, which we've been touching on, is there is this fundamental dilemma of the within the capitalist system that we're operating in, between the wish of climate change agenda to actually change the way we live in order to have a more sustainable world, and the imperatives of capitalism, which are to make more money, to produce more stuff, etc. Going back to why I think that the pandemic is not a game changer in terms of helping the climate change lobby, if I could put it that way, I think that people are going to go, as soon as we've defeated the virus and we've got a vaccine and that's gone away, attention is going to go into this question of never letting this happen again. Therefore, money is going to go into research and medical research and things like that. It's going to be diverted away from climate change, because we in the affluent world, well, the whole world, don't ever want this to happen again. The economy and the business are going to be encouraged just to get on with it, get back to business as usual.
I think, Jeremy, I fear that you're I fear that you're right. The new possibility that that I want to make sure that people fully see, though, is this. So first of all, is that the pandemic is something that we as ordinary citizens never thought would happen. So this is, for the UK, this is probably the worst thing's ever happened since World War II. I mean, we're back to people being at risk of being blown up in their beds overnight. You know, so people can, within 1 or 2 weeks, people can end up being dead because of this thing. And we've never had this before. So first of all, people can see that really bad things can happen. And in terms of what you say about the capitalist system, then this comes down to regulation. What's going on in the US is that regulations were put in place following the original Earth Day in 1970. Regulations were put in place to protect the environment. Obama did a lot on this. I've seen the woman who was the head of the Environmental Protection Agency, the EPA. I've seen her talk about this. Trump is stripping away these things in the decisions that he's making. So regulation is critically important. And in terms of regulation, what I see happening is that within the UK, because of coronavirus, in a period of 3 days, the government shut down about 1/3 of the UK economy. They shut the restaurants, the pubs, the events, the football, the gatherings, the churches, all of the commercial things were shut. 1/3 of the economy was shut down. Now, okay, for climate change, we do need to make some changes, but there's no way we're talking about shutting down 1/3 of the economy. What needs to be done is, and please, CCL, please look at correcting me on this if I've got this wrong. What needs to be done is to take the oil and gas sector and reduce that by about 8% per annum. So it's a phasing down of oil and gas, and to replace that with other stuff. And the big companies involved, the BPs and Shells, etc., they all know this. They will all have a plan B for what they're going to do. So if you work for Shell or BP, then you'll be reallocated from getting oil and gas out the ground to working on other stuff instead. So it's not a massive change. It's 8% per annum for one sector of the economy. So Garry, do we have another question? Gary's not there.
You do. You have lots. The comments are coming in thick and fast. Iris says, do you think there'll be a surge in demand, use of environmentally destructive industries? People rush to buy long distance flights using the car more, etc. after the pandemic. I think not. From what I understand, the travel industry will be affected for the next year, but I would love to know both of your gentlemen's opinion on that.
Jeremy, what do you think?
I don't think there'll be a surge of demand, because I think what the economists, again, I can only talk for the UK, are predicting a very slow return. They think that, I mean, they're actually worried about deflation, aren't they? That we're all onto our money and not do very much. So I don't think that'll happen. I mean, I'm very worried. Well, I'm worried economically, as it were, for those, the hospitality, the airline sectors and all that. But I mean, to take airlines, for instance, I mean, for the climate change agenda, this is a, you know, blessing in disguise. I mean, the fact that we cut the flight so dramatically will make a big difference.
Well, I mean, I don't really agree with that, Jeremy, because, you know, it's just such a sudden,
flying, Charles.
it's such a sudden change.
I mean,
well, no, Jeremy, it's too big a change. It's a crazy change. It's too big. You know, we need things to survive. We need things to change gradually. And yesterday's news about the oil price going to zero and negative. I mean, this doesn't help. You know, this does not help the economy. We need things planned. And what I like the idea that the government's flag to business and individuals, look, we are going to make these changes. We are making a commitment to reduce oil and gas by 8% a year. It's going to start from, you know, a date, and then everybody knows what they're doing. People want you know, security. They want security information and knowledge about what's going on.
Yeah, 8% per annum is a lot, though, Charles. I mean, if you're running BP or Shell, I mean, to say that your worldwide market is going down by 8% per annum for oil, which is your main commodity. I mean, and I think this is an observation I'd make about the whole climate change industry, as it were. They've got no idea or how important oil is to everything. You know, not only is it an energy source, but I mean, it's a provider of pensions, it's a provider of plastic, you know, everything our modern world, a lot of our modern world depends on oil. So, you know, to say that we can switch, you know, even in 20 years away from oil is, I think, implying that we're going to have to live a very different sort of life.
Well, I don't agree, Jeremy. I think the oil and gas industry, I mean, I don't like this having been done to them, but they've suddenly seen the demand cut by 25%. So if they've seen demand cut by 25% this last month, then that gives them a bit of practice at dealing with 8%. But the oil and gas industry, Jeremy, they've known about this for years. For years, they know they've got to do this, and they can update their spreadsheets every year to say, well, look, another year's gone by, we've made some more money, but we're going to have to reduce faster in future. They've got the plan Bs for this. They must have. So anybody online watching who's got any insight into this industry and can give us some real facts on this, that would be really good. But anyway, Jeremy, I think Garry as well, we need to move on, Jeremy, to your next topic, which is basically what people can do about climate change at no cost, because this is an area where you are an expert, Jeremy. Garry, are you back?
I haven't left you, sir. There's a gentleman called Mitchell. He says, what's the biggest way to cut our environmental impact? Which leads us very nicely into the next segment. But
fantastic.
I'm watching in the wings.
So, Jeremy, the subject for this section is what can I do about global warming at no cost? And I'm really pleased to have you talking about this, Jeremy, because as well as your the skills and experience that you talked about earlier, you are now a volunteer advisor with the Citizens Advice Bureau, and so you're seeing a lot of people day to day, or talking to a lot of people day to day, who basically are short of money, and everyone needs their help as part of climate change. So how can they best be involved in helping with all of this, rather than it being a threat to them, Jeremy?
Yeah, I think I'd just preface my remarks by saying that perhaps not people watching or participating in this webinar, but you know, the numbers of people on very low incomes or on just below around average income, which I think is about 25,000 pounds a year in the UK, is a large number. I mean, when universal credit is finally rolled out, it's going to cover 7 million people. You know, the UK population is what, 60 million, 62 million. So, you know, we've got a large chunk of people don't have much money. You know, they're living from day to day. A lot of them are using food banks at the moment to survive. So the question I've had with you, Charles, in the past is, you know, don't forget these people, because a lot of them probably are either, you know, they do buy into some of the arguments of climate change. And I mean, I've talked to a friend who's in the climate change movement in Norwich, and he's been very helpful about this, because he's much more strongly in tune to this than I am, to be honest. And his whole lifestyle is more tuned out, although he's not short of money himself. But he had 3 ideas when I spoke to him about this, which I think are quite useful. And there's nothing original about this. One is people who live in walking distance of their shops, and a lot of people do live in cities and towns. Why don't you walk or run with a rucksack to the shop to get most of your goods? Not everything. Some things will come online, some things will come from Sainsbury's. And if you've got a family, take the whole family with lots of rucksacks. You know, it's an easy thing to do. Leave the car at home. That would be a first thing. The second thing that he feels very strongly about, and again, we've discussed it earlier, is he says tend towards a vegan diet. That's because of the, you know, the damaging impact of modern agriculture and the meat production. And I won't go into all the reasons for that, but you know, he says it's just a matter of perhaps instead of having 4 meals, evening meals with meat or processed fish, he said processed fish is just as bad, a week, perhaps try and cut that back to 1 or 2. And if everybody starts doing that, it does make a big difference. The third thing, of course, is use less plastic. And I mean, again, I don't want to go into the details about that, but again, we can all alter our lifestyles a little bit to use less plastic, and that is beginning to happen. It's, you know, perhaps not going through to the lower income groups as much as for the better off people. But, you know, again, with the right publicity, he thinks that that could help. So I think those are 3 things that anybody without much money could implement if they feel is worth it. And of course, that's where, again, the messaging is so important.
Well, Jeremy, I'm completely shocked. I can 100% agree with you. So, you know, for the first time in this conversation, first time in years, I can actually 100% agree with you, Jeremy. So that's brilliant. Your friend in Norwich. I mean, if anybody wants to phone a friend about climate change, then Jeremy's friend in Norwich is absolutely the person to call. The last point you've made, Jeremy, this point about choice. I mean, this is critical. The people have been listening to before coronavirus, people were listening to the news, and all the time there was things about climate change. And for whatever reason, people were listening to it and pretending that it didn't affect them, or they weren't involved, or it wouldn't be their problem. So there was a lot of pretending about this. So, I mean, as I see it, as we talked about, the fact is that if we don't do anything, right? If we don't do anything, then we carry on with what's called, you know, normal business as usual. And the sad thing is that every year CO2 emissions go up because we're emitting way more CO2 than actually can be removed naturally. Or mechanically, but from the environment. So we've got a choice. It keeps on going up. And what the scientists are saying, it's not me saying this, I'm listening to the scientists on this, the increase in CO2 emissions in the air means that the temperature will keep going up. And it comes to a point when it becomes actually unsustainable because it starts to melt the tundra. So it's obviously melting the Antarctic ice. It will start to melt the tundra. And at that point, then we have even more CO2 emissions and even more methane being emitted, and therefore it becomes completely unstoppable. So we have this choice. Either we carry on as normal, or we say, right, I really, really want to stop climate change, not just at an intellectual level of thinking about it, oh, it's a great idea, now I'll move on to the world's next problem of solving poverty or something else. You know, it's in understanding intellectually, emotionally, to say, right, I really do want a better world for my children, I'm going to do something about this. And then in your body, you say, I'm going to do something about it, I'm going to take action. So you really are going to choose to stop global warming. And at that point, then what you can do, if you do want to do that, then you can sign up on our other website, which is stopglobalwarming.today. So stopglobalwarming.today, go to that website, just sign up. There's no commitment, no charge, nothing, just sign up to say that you agree with that and you want to do something about it. So Jeremy, back over to you.
Well, I mean, I would like to congratulate you and No CO2, because I think your website, although I don't believe it's got mass traction at the moment, does offer the man in the street a really easy way to help abate climate change. And, you know, again, it's probably a matter of money, really. I mean, I got something through the post just today from another tree planting organisation, and they must have put a lot of money into that. So, you know, if you could in some way get No CO2 out there in everybody's face more, and get people on the site and donating, that would make a big difference. But I do think that the psychology of commitment to this is much more difficult than activists think it is. I think the you know,
and this is a good start. This is a good start.
Last year, I've actually done.
I've got somebody called Mittal Shah. He's coming at it with a very different angle. My point, as per original comment, is with regards to population, reduce family size to manageable levels, especially in high consumption countries. Is this the biggest way to reduce our environmental impact? Isn't that interesting?
Well, we've got Alistair Curry from Population Matters talking about that. I wouldn't want to steal his thunder. He's an expert on that. I'm not, so let's leave that one to him. But Garry, Jeremy, let's just do, we've got just a couple of minutes left. Let's just finish off on this conversation of what people can do at no or low cost. So you mentioned the tree planting. Thank you very much. Yes, that is £6 a month over 3 years to plant 1,750 trees for you. If you'd like to do that, that really does help for the reasons we've said. But if you don't have that amount of money, particularly at the moment, then there is also a load of stuff you can do. The switching electricity is really, really important for me. A lot of people in the UK, weirdly, are still on standard variable rate, which means that you pay a lot more for your electricity. All you need to do is to look at one of the green energy companies like Bulb, someone like this, switch to green electricity, green or clean electricity, and you are getting green electricity, plus you are probably paying less for it than you do now. So that's really, really important. Jeremy, your point about cycling to the shop, what I would say there is that the key thing for me is actually to, every time you buy something, every time you do something, every time you get in the car, think about the amount of CO2 that you're emitting. I mean, the numbers are very simple. It's 2.5 kilograms of CO2 for every litre of fuel that you use. So if you fill up with 60 litres, that's 150 kilograms of CO2 that you will be burning off in a short while. If you get on a plane, which obviously people are not doing at the moment, but when people do go back to flying, that's about 125 kilograms per hour of flight. It's very easy to look up where you're going to.
But before you cut me off, I think that's fine for you. You're a techie nerd, if you don't mind me saying. That is absolutely, all those numbers mean absolutely nothing to the man in the street. Just forget it. If you want to get through to the man in the street, what the movement's got to do is it's got to produce a plausible narrative about the sort of society that we will be living in 50 years' time that is materially different from our present society. And I think that is what a lot of thought's got to go into. For instance, people feel very alienated in the present world. I mean, and, you know, to have a more community-based society, I think would appeal to a lot of people. That would also help the whole agenda towards climate change. But I think that just creating numbers of people about what they're doing, and they've got to go to the shops anyway. You know, I live in a village 10 miles outside Norwich. You know, I don't have any option. I've got to get in my car. You know, just forget it. You've got to really concentrate on the story. The story is the thing that grips people's imagination, and that will get them to commit.
You've warmed my heart, Jeremy. We are exactly aligned to that. And here's the great thing about debate, that there are always different sides to the argument, but we all want the same thing. Now we have our next speaker from Brazil, and I know he has a question up his sleeve. So over to you, sir. You've got a couple of minutes to get your question in. Stephen, if you unmute yourself
Yes. Hi. Thank you, Jeremy. That was a very good, inspiring intervention. I wanted to ask you why focus on oil? Because in fact, most of the greenhouse gas emissions come from coal and gas. So it's been published last year that in fact the CH4 emissions, so the methane emissions from coal and gas actually make it even worse than just accounting for CO2. So yeah, I think it's easier to focus on those two kinds of energy because they are more easily replaceable than oil. And actually, I was going to ask you, so what about dividing the field of fossil fuel energies and trying to play one against the others?
I mean, the point about coal is absolutely right. And I think today, Sweden and Austria have come off coal-generated electricity. Belgium already has, and Britain will come off in, I think, 2025. So, I mean, you're quite right, Stefan. We've got a position where electricity generated by coal in China and the Far East is really the norm, and that is something that should be concentrated on. But I suppose I concentrate on oil because of transport and how our whole society is dependent on transport fuels and our oil at the moment.
Now, Jeremy, we've come to that time.
Yeah.
That it's my job to acknowledge you for your generosity of giving up your time. And we really appreciate it. I absolutely loved that you stood to your point. And the fact is that unless we give a story, the average man in the street isn't going to care. So I think that came through loud and clear, and your knowledge. And Charles, amazing that interview. You know, I go to schools, I do talks, and then the kids, I say to the kids, look, do what you're passionate about. And they say, but how do you know you're passionate about anything? I say, well, time flies. I feel I've blinked and the interview's over. So Jeremy, you're so kind. All you need to do, you can have the last word, of course, is switch off your camera and please stay in the debate until the end.
Well, just before you do, Jeremy, let me say thank you so much, Jeremy, for joining us for your double session and for all your insights and for putting up with all the brickbats that we throw at you. So thank you so much.
Bye, Charles.
Thank you, Jeremy.
Bye, Garry.
Inspiring
Thank
talk.
you.
Very good.
Bye, Stefan.
Great way to start.
So Stefan, very welcome.
Oh man, man,
very welcome to you.
Hello. No. Rob is from Brazil. I'm in Corsica. We both live in the forest.
So Stefan, do you want to just tip your camera a little bit so you're a bit more central?
Yeah.
Magic.
Yes.
Okay. And so Rob, what's happened? Rob, can you join? Anyway, whatever.
Rob is going to join. Give us a minute.
Yeah.
So Stefan, just while we're waiting for Rob, obviously you're in. Rob, hi, good to see you. So Stefan, just talking to yourself. So we were asking people, what you obviously you live normally in Paris. You're in Corsica, yeah. So let me just ask you, what actually are you doing differently than you would normally do? I mean, obviously you're in Corsica, but what else are you doing differently because of the extra French style lockdown that you're in? So what are you doing differently, Stefan?
Well, we've gone completely 100% remote. So it's been remote work and remote teaching because I'm actually teaching a few classes. It has taken some time and skills to adapt to the new conditions, but now that's it. We are 100% digital. So, and we're lucky that we have the internet because the same thing 10 years ago or 20 years ago, the internet existed, but didn't have the current bandwidth. And it could have been more tedious to keep working and teaching.
And the other thing, Stefan, so what are you going to be, from what you've been doing in the lockdown, what are you going to be doing differently in life afterwards? I mean, does it mean you're going to be moving to Corsica permanently and instead of Paris?
That's an idea, of course. The life is much easier during lockdown here. Anyway, it means we we just need to speed up. You know, you and I have been working with the other fine people on this call for years on advocacy and climate solutions. And really today, it's the 50th Earth Day, and it's the day to deliver the message that the solutions are here. We've been working to make it easier for people to access them. I can't say I'm going to do things differently. I think I'm going to do more of the same, actually, which is warning people about climate change and telling them that we have solutions, but we really need to speed up.
Okay, well, look, you're going to talk about that in a minute, but let's first introduce Rob. So, Rob, I'm really pleased you can join us. And just so everybody knows, the reason your picture is not quite up to the same standard as the others is because you are in Brazil on a satellite line. So, Rob, we met when you and I were both in Scotland last year at Findhorn. For their Climate Change and Consciousness Conference. It was a real pleasure to meet you there, Rob, and talk to you and learn about particularly you being in Brazil and your work on not only on tree planting, but on stopping deforestation. So first of all, tell us a little bit actually where are you in Brazil? Because what I understand is that you're in the middle of nowhere, 200 miles from the nearest town. So tell us where you are, Rob.
Okay, hi Charles, hi Stefan, hi everybody. Thank you for inviting me. So I'm in the coastal area of Brazil in the mountains, and it is about 300 kilometers from the third largest city of Brazil called Salvador. And I'm in an area where there are large patches of the Mata Atlântica forest, which is a different type of rainforest than the Amazon forest, a completely different biotope, where I'm currently doing my part in reforestation and nature protection.
Super. And so given where you are you guys all social distancing, or are you living near to indigenous people who are just doing their own thing? So what's it like where you are, Rob?
Everybody is doing social distancing here, but a lot of it has been under my pressure and example, because in the beginning it was not very clear that people would have to do that here too, and for them it's still a very far away pandemic. It hasn't reached anywhere near yet. Okay, so back over to Stefan. You just disappeared. So I was going to say, Stefan, back over to you to talk, or yeah, here you are. Stefan, your microphone. Would you like to tell us about what we can do to stop global warming, Stefan?
Yes, maybe I'll share my screen so that people can read, because I'm not sure they. No, I have my French accent. So basically. What I'm going to talk about is really this action plan that we have devised, which is 12 solutions to limit global warming. So, as you know, climate change is a complex issue. Unfortunately, there are no simple solutions to complex problems. So we have to have quite a complex plan, and there have been solution plans with 100 or even one with 1,000 solutions. And that leaves people at a loss as to where to get started. This is not workable. And so we've reduced, the first thing that we've done is prioritize, which is reduce the number of solutions so that people can keep track of them. And the nice thing about this set of 12 solutions, it's half and half. Half of it is for people to implement directly, and the other half is collective action. We've had feedback from government leaders and business leaders who say, okay, we are ready to do something, but the problem is that the people are not united. There is no consensus about what to do as a priority. And it's really a pitfall for the whole climate change movement not to be able to unite around some key points and key actions like tree planting and the other ones that we have devised with you and Rob and other people. So that's my message for the 50th Earth Day. It's not a surprise what's happening today. Actually, I can show you on the second slide, what was published 20 years ago, and which I presented again at COP23 in 2017 in Bonn. And basically, we know when climate risks kick in. And there is only one climate risk that kicks in very early, under 1 degree, plus 1 degree, and it's the risk of viral infection. So this has been published. When I hear people say that the current crisis could not be predicted, it really drives me mad. I said, no, it's been published 20 years ago. We've been talking about it. Nobody listened. And the question is, why are people ignoring warnings? And Jeremy said a lot about this, because it's not going to kill someone in the next 6 months or anything, except during some very unusual events like the COVID-19 pandemic. And then maybe nothing happens for a couple of years and people forget about it and nothing gets done. Hopefully this crisis is serious enough so that something will be done. And then we can, of course, try to get out of this crisis with some learned lessons. So the lessons learned should be that we can do something right now. If there are 3 very simple actions that people can get started on, it's to focus on stopping coal. There is another proposition, which is the climate income, and I've put the links here. And we can also stop deforestation, and Rob is going to talk about this, and plant trees, which is the object of no CO2. And then you can get started on individual actions now. So there are 7 climate solutions which are easy for people to implement, and 5 climate solutions which require action by governments. And then we've put up a very long listing with lots of numbers and documentation and links. So the first one, of course, is go carbon neutral by planting trees. The second is to reduce rainforest deforestation. We wrote that 3 years ago, and this is what Rob has been doing for years now. But there's still a long way to go.
So Stefan, just on that point, let's bring in Rob, shall we, now, to talk about deforestation, because Rob knows about this. So Rob, this is what Stefan's has put together, this opportunity to reduce this by 10%. I mean, you're in Brazil, where a lot of deforestation is going on. So how do you see this? What really needs to be done here, Rob?
Well, I think the list that Stefan has is fabulous, but at this point I would like to change the word reduce into stop, and that goes actually for all old growth forests in all habitats. The one thing that I would like to mention again, because not everybody is aware, is that specifically the largest tropical forest in the world, the Amazon forest, is nearing a tipping point. Where if it is reduced by another few percent, we're talking somewhere about 5% or so, the climate over the forest will change in such a way that the whole forest will basically die down in a matter of decades, which means that it will turn into savanna, partly through wildfires that are a magnitude bigger than the ones we've seen in Australia, which would be a disaster for the people and the animals and the forest, of course, but also for the climate of the whole of South America. And it's in fact a systemic issue that it would even trigger changes in other parts of the world, which would be so big, including an enormous amount of CO2 that would be going into the air, that, well, basically, if the Amazon forest would reach a tipping point, we have a problem of global magnitude, which probably makes it impossible for us to stop catastrophic climate change.
Okay, so this is good. This is good. I mean, it's bad to, it's a bad thing, but it's good that you're sharing this, Rob. But so let's just talk about the balance of how much of this is being caused by individuals who are doing their own thing for their families, and how much is it being caused by big business, which is trying to put in oil plantations and stuff. So what's the balance between these two causes?
of course, the actual work is done by a lot of people with small incomes who need to put food on the table for their families. They are the food soldiers, let's say, but the real movement is done by large corporations which reside in their headquarters thousands of kilometers from where it's happening. And so actually, if there would be one thing we could do worldwide in order to stop the deforestation in the Amazon, basically it would be stop eating beef.
Okay.
Because both the meat eating and the soybeans that are planted to feed the beef are the two largest reasons why the forests are cleared. At the same time, of course, there is a one-time profit when people clear a forest, and that is the wood has a value. I can tell you that on the land where I'm living, the trees on it, if they would be made into timber, would be roughly 4 times the value of the land. So it's economically very simple to become a millionaire. You take a piece of forest, you cut the wood, you sell it. It's easy to get the rubber stamps to make it legal wood, and then you make a lot of money, and then you can start putting cattle on it or soybeans.
So thanks for that, Rob. Yeah. So one of the things that I think is worth mentioning here is just to link this to coronavirus, is that as part of coronavirus, the UK government is paying people not to work. And so what you've talked about here, the land being worth 4 times, the forest being worth 4 times more than the land, this is a factor that that basically needs to be taken into account in order to change people's motivations. But anyway, that's a really great explanation. So what I'm hearing there is stop eating beef. So let's hand back to Stefan to continue, because you've got a lot more points to cover here, Stefan.
Yeah, so just to be clear with Rob, it's written stop deforestation twice, and the third time it's halt deforestation. So we do agree on that. Of course, when we're saying reduce, it's because we realize that it's not possible to stop next year. It won't happen. So there is always a kind of schizophrenic attitude, which is between what we want to achieve, which is really stop deforestation, and what we can achieve next year, which is going to be, okay, maybe just reduce by 10%. But if you reduce by 10% for 10 years, you've basically won, okay? So let's give the world 10 years to stop deforestation, to stop coal power plants, because you cannot switch them off overnight. And then those are the most important actions. Then you have a third one, which is switch to clean energy. And that means wherever it's available, solar power, of course, but where it's not available, and you always have to think that, well, there is always at least 10, 12 hours per day when there is no sun, then you would need another kind of power. So either you would need a lot of batteries, which is possible in some places, but not everywhere. Or you will need something to replace the coal power plants. And then you don't have much choice. It's going to be hydropower, nuclear power, or some kind of clean biomass, which is very hard to tackle because most of the biomass really is very polluting, has health and climate impacts. So this means that whenever we are dealing with alternative sources of energy, we must take care to make sure that they are really our low carbon power. Of course, the largest untapped, unknown source of renewable power is heat pumps. In a heat pump, you will use 1/3 of electricity and 2/3 of renewable heat. And that's the most efficient way to use renewable energy in cold countries, of course. The fourth item is really related to transport. And so we're going back to this issue with Jeremy, which is, okay, why focus on oil? Okay, you don't need to have actually an active action to reduce oil, because oil is the most difficult of the fossil fuels to replace. And this is going to be a slow transformation of the entire oil-based fuels to cleaner fuels, which would be mostly electricity-based, but provided you have clean electricity, of course. If you replace oil with carbon-based electricity, you haven't achieved anything. Here is you have your item 5, which is the migration of the diet away from meat and dairy, which is, we don't need to eat as much meat and as much dairy as most people do in developed countries. And here are some numbers. You can check the facts. Number 6 is the reduction of CO2 emissions in all the products and the materials. And also another action, which is to support population management, which is done at the UN level by UNFPA, and which also involves a lot of sustainable development goals like women education and other kind of social actions. And then you have the government level actions, which then we need to organize at a national and international level. And there are 5 of them. So the first one is going to be a commitment, a clear commitment to 1.5 degrees, because as you can see in these graphics, 1.5 degrees is safe, but 2 degrees is not safe. So what's written in the Paris Agreement is that global warming should be limited to under 2 degrees, not 2 degrees. So there are 2 people who rely on 2 degrees scenario. 2 degrees is too high, it's too late. The risk of water shortage is here. It means 300 people, 300 lives in danger, 300 million lives in danger before 2080. This was published 20 years ago. It was a bit optimistic. You can replace 2080 by 2050 here. And it could be even worse. So plus 2 degrees not safe, plus 1.5 degrees safe. And there was a report published in 2018 that showed that if you want to go from a plus 2 degree scenario to a plus 1.5 degree scenario, then you only have 10 years to react. It means we need to start acting now and get definitive results before 2030. And that's in line with what Rob said. We need to stop deforestation now, not in 2030. So I'm going back to the collective action. So we have devised, and that has been done by an organization named Citizen Climate Lobby, which is the carbon fee and dividend in the US and Canada. And in Europe, it's named the climate income. And it's basically moving from a carbon tax scheme to a carbon price and dividend, which means that the price would be paid by all the CO2 and methane emission producers, and it will be evenly redistributed to the people. So it will be a climate justice measure. And that fixes a lot of issues with the carbon tax, which cannot be too high, otherwise the poor people pays. And the price of carbon is paid. Yes, sure.
Can I just interrupt here, because I think this is the greatest moment in history to introduce a carbon tax, because of the ridiculously low price of fossil fuels right now. So this is an absolute opportunity we need to push for now. Sorry to interrupt.
Yeah, definitely.
Maybe I should interrupt. We're going to be bringing our next speaker on in 3 minutes. Celia, just so you gentlemen know, Celia, she said that's a great point from all the panelists. People around the world seem to be voting with governments that do not back them. Businesses need huge incentives to make sweeping green changes. And I love what Colina said. We love watching reality TV shows. The loss of our rainforests is actually reality, and we are closing our eyes.
Okay. Yes.
So, Stefan, if you can start to wrap up, and then we can bring in Rob to finish off.
I'm getting there. So basically, there are 2 very simple petitions to sign, which are Exit Coal Now and Climate Income, and that's it. That's the easiest thing you can do, and those 2 actions can reduce CO2 emissions by 40% within 10 years. So I mean, that's it. You just click here and click here, or type bit.ly exit call now or EU in SOP, and then you give money to noco2.org to plant trees, and you're started. You can be carbon neutral next year.
Okay, thank you so much, Stefan. Rob, over to you, please, to your input. If you can switch your mic on. Thanks, Rob.
Yeah, Stefan, of course, I'm with you on all these items, and I'd like to take the discussion, if you don't mind, just one step deeper, because yes, I agree we should plant about 1 trillion trees. There's actually on the World Economic Forum in Davos, there was they launched a 1 trillion tree program, and back of the envelope calculations say that if we would do that, it would somewhere between 40 and 50% of the current emissions would be reduced in about 10 years after the trees have been put in the ground. 1 trillion trees is a lot. The guesstimates about how many trees there are in the world vary, but I think we're somewhere between 3 and 4 trillion is maybe a good guesstimate. So 1 trillion trees is a lot, and it would help a lot. But what I would like to do is take it one step deeper, because the problem with the whole climate change issue, as it has already been mentioned by Jeremy, is that we have the solutions. We have been acknowledging the problem for about 40 years, but we're not moving in the right direction. And so that is because the system somehow doesn't allow us to make this change. And I think it would be a good idea, especially now that the world economy has come to a full stop, to start asking ourselves, what society would we like to live in? Because climate change is a part of a larger problem that we all feel in our guts, that the way things are going is not the right direction. But we were on a fast-moving train and didn't know how to deal with that question. So I'd like to just put that here, that I think one of the ways to break through the subconscious barriers to get to really implement solution is people to see a vision of a better world emerging from us talking about it and designing that future, rather than having to do all kinds of things which seem like to diminish the life that they're living right now.
Rob, you're so right. Stefan, can I ask you to take your presentation off? It's a great pleasure that I'm introducing Jenny, and with a virtual social distancing, I'm not going to come on the screen because there's 4 of you. There you go.
Come on too, Garry.
Well, 5.
Hi, Rob.
If you're watching this on mobile, 5 will confuse things. Charles, I leave it to you to acknowledge the gentleman for quite an amazing talk, and I'm wowed. Charles, you're unmuted, sir. Oh, there we go.
Okay, thank you, Garry. Yeah, I really want to acknowledge both of you for fantastic contribution. So Stefan, hopefully, thank you so much for that. Hopefully you will put your material in your notes afterwards so people can see it. Yeah. So thank you so much for those insights. And also, Rob, thank you for joining us from Brazil, from the forest, Atlantic forest, I think you said. And thank you for the amazing insight into the risk from the destruction of the Amazon. So critical insights there. It's another trigger point that I was not aware of in that way. And so, Rob, you've also given us a fantastic introduction to Jenny here, because you, Rob, were talking just now about what sort of society we want, a vision for a better world. And so what we've got now is we've got Jenny talking about.
Stay safe, and I hope to meet you in person one day.
And so we've got Jenny talking about a very different angle here. So Jenny's going to be talking with us about how is lockdown connecting us to the planet. So hi Jenny, how are you doing?
Good, thank you. I've just come in from being with the sunshine in the garden briefly before I came here. I thought I should get some inspiration from the tadpoles before I came to see you.
Well, don't say too much about the sunshine, because we are relying on having an audience, and we don't want the sun to compete. The sun will be out tomorrow, folks. That's
there's a song there somewhere.
That's my forecast. Yeah.
Well, Charles, seeing as you talk about audience, we're reaching around 600 people, which is lovely. Nearly 100 people have engaged. We are definitely doing our bit. Jenny, thank you for joining us.
My pleasure.
It's like an interesting office you have there.
Yes, it's got a whole range of books.
We love books, lots of pictures.
Some which I need to read, and lockdown is an opportunity.
I'm busier than ever.
Yes.
How that has happened to me.
So Jenny, you've already started to talk a little bit about it, but let's ask you the question. So Jenny, what are you doing differently in lockdown than you were doing before?
I think lockdown is such an exceptional time for all of us, and whether we're extroverts or introverts, whether we like to spend time at home or outside, this is such a different time. And of course, we have to acknowledge the anxieties and grief and what many people are going through at the moment or concerned about. But the other side of the coin is this sort of unprecedented opportunity we have to take a pause and look at our lives and do things differently. So for me, over the last year, I have been trying to walk more in nature and to visit my local parks and to go out into the countryside. And what's changed in this period is that it's become really vital for me to do that at least every other day, ideally every day. And of course, I can't travel so far. I don't have a car, and if I did, I probably wouldn't be using it. But everywhere that I can walk to, I try to get to in the course of a week. And particularly some ancient woodland, a very tiny patch of ancient woodland near me in North London, where the birds have just been seeming to run riot and delight in the fact that the sound of traffic is almost inaudible now. You hear an occasional passing train, but you hear the birds really fully. And that is such a big change in the pleasures of my life, I have to say.
Great. Well, thank you so much for that. So let's hand over to you now to talk about your subject. So over to you, Jenny.
Yes, I think this is exceptional time for us all, and we've been aware from research for a long period of time, and it's become particularly popular in recent years to realise the health-giving benefits of nature, that it both helps our physical health to be out in nature and also our mental health. In some cultures, particularly in Eastern cultures, it's been acknowledged for a long time. I think we've been catching up a bit, certainly in the UK. There's something that in Japan they've called forest bathing for a long time, and have taken people as part of their recuperation from illness out into forests. And you can analyse that in more detail, but I want to approach it from a slightly different angle, which is more a sort of inner angle rather than what can we take from this, and more of an understanding that we aren't standing somewhere on a separate planet apart from the natural world, that we are part of it. There was a really beautiful quote from Einstein, which I won't read word for word, but he basically said that we all live in this sense of our separation of our feelings and consciousness from the rest of the universe. And that is a sort of optical delusion, which damages the way that we relate to everything around us. And that our task, it almost creates a mental prison for us. And our task is to widen our circles of compassion from the people and our immediate surroundings that we have around us, so that we gradually widen those ripples to touch living things in all their beauty. His final sentence is widening our circle of compassion to embrace all living creatures and the whole of nature in its beauty. Now, normally,
I have to say, I've heard so many Einstein quotes. I think he was talking about love, was he not there? Charles is back, so I love an Einstein quote. And that was
well, you think somebody with a brain of that size who can not only talk about the principles of physics of the universe, but what we should be doing to deal with our distorted inner feelings and sense of our place in the universe.
And they're not the most brilliant people, both creative and scientific. And nature certainly can bring out both of those. So I could talk about that all day. I'm off. Charles, over to you.
Yeah. So, one of the things that I've been aware of through reading and feeling, particularly since, Charles, you and I were at Findhorn a year ago exactly to think about consciousness and climate change, is that it's not just what can we take from nature, which is rather an old-fashioned way of only seeing it as something of material value to us, but what is our place within nature. And many cultures in the world that are closer to the way that we've lived over hundreds of years, well, not hundreds, thousands, tens of thousands of years, have always seen their place as much more interconnected. They've got this, but we've got to work hard at it. We have this space in our lives when we can do that, whether we live in the middle of the countryside or we just look out of our window in lockdown at the sky and everything that we see out of our window that shows us nature moving. So I've taken the opportunity, sort of, particularly I think with trees, who are amazing, magnificent beings, and at their sort of grandest have been with us for hundreds of years, while we human beings have been doing odd things and living our lives and having our crises sort of below them, to recognize that what we breathe out, they take in, and what they breathe out, we breathe in. So if you can stand next to a tree, that exchange is happening, whether you do it knowingly or not. So there's degrees of consciousness and attention that you can bring to the natural world. We have 5 senses. Often we just look. At the moment, we're hearing a lot more. People are conscious of the dawn chorus, or what nature sounds like, the sound of the trees and the wind in the trees when we don't have traffic and we don't have aircraft noise so much. But we've also got touch, taste and smell, which we can also use in nature, particularly when the traffic fumes are much less. Sometimes you just walk along a street and there's a bush or a tree and what was that scent? And you can go back, something that you've never noticed before. And the things that have been mentioned already on discussions, really important changes, rely a lot on our thinking and rational mind and active planning mind. But in order for us to make behavioural change, we have to involve more than that. And certainly our hearts and our feelings, which motivate our behaviour so strongly in a way that our conscious brains are often hardly aware of at all. But even deeper than that, some people would call it calling on a religious basis or spiritual, whatever it is, it's that deeper sense of connection that Einstein talked about. This is our opportunity to strengthen all of that. And if you like, I can talk about some practices that would help with that. But it puts us in a different place, some would say more grounded, from which to act when we come back into action in the world.
Well, I think it would be really good, Jenny. I mean, at the current time, there'll be, I mean, if you're lucky enough to have a garden and the sun's out, and then that's all good. There's people there who are sadly don't have that. There are people who are trapped with far too many people trapped in a small flat, where access to the outside is just, once supposed to be once a day or whatever. So if you've got some, I think it'd be helpful if you have got some sort of simple tips or whatever that you were able to share with people who are feeling stressed, who are in contact with people who are stressed and need some help on this. I think that would be very good if you are able to share something with us. Thank you.
Yes, I really want to take the principles of mindfulness, which many people will have heard of, and there is some really good material free online. If people search for the Mindfulness Initiative, there's free materials I brought together. But the basic thing to work through is to stop and take a pause, and normally that means taking a few deep breaths, and then to focus on something. And traditionally, people have used their breath to focus on, but that's not essential. And at present, particularly with COVID-19, sometimes the breath is quite hard. So people, you can use feet and seat as well, wherever you're touching the ground, or you're holding yourself, to just put your attention there, away from all this busyness which has been in your mind. And then if you can, to look at something that's in the natural world. Maybe you're lucky enough to go outside and be doing this in the garden. Maybe you're looking out, as I am at the moment, at the sky and trees. And to put your attention there and to listen and use your eyes and ears and your senses. And if your mind drifts back to thoughts, as that's what minds do, to notice how similar that is to the trees moving or the clouds moving. And then, there's stopping, there's paying attention, and then there's compassion, to think of particularly compassion for yourself. Maybe you see yourself as something quite small in relation to a large tree, or maybe you see yourself as the nurturer of even a pot plant in your house, something that's looking after it. So consciously thinking about your emotions and being gentle with yourself, or your role, or all your imperfections, because we're all imperfect, and just remembering that the life of everything in nature has its cycle, whether it's a tree that lasts hundreds of years, or a seedling that you may be about to thin out, not a task I enjoy doing, that only lasts briefly, that there is a cycle, and that it doesn't mean that things aren't worthwhile, and that you can't have compassion and delight in them and in aspects of yourself. So you have the sort of settling down, you have the grounding, you pay attention, and you have compassion. And often if people do this and they gradually expand the time that they're spending doing it, they do a little every day, and they find a context that feels right for them, they find that the constant chatter in their minds, and particularly the chatter that can be very critical of themselves, that takes up so much of our attention so often, starts to diminish and to lose more of its power. And that our attention, that's a very wandering thing. Some people describe it as a chimp that's sort of running around and rushing here and there, that it becomes more trained, and that the things that we want to focus our attention on don't run off onto, you know, what are we being told we should buy next, which is one of the things that feeds us as consumers. What's the next beep we've had in our phone about the likes that we're experiencing? All these things that stop us from really focusing on what's important in our lives and the connections that we have that are always with us. And the lockdown is actually, if we take it in the right way, it is a gift to give us that chance to redirect our attention, to reconnect to our compassion, and to re-notice the beauty of nature that we probably haven't really noticed since we were children. Children naturally can be fascinated for an hour at a time with, you know, ants crawling around the garden, or, you know, fishing for frog spawn, or, you know, the birds hopping from tree to tree. And some of that natural delight can come back to us. And if we do it well, then it will change our relationship with the natural world and our sense of connection, which will serve us well in what we need to do afterwards to regenerate and rescue nature from the state we've left it in.
Well, Jenny, that was absolutely amazing. Garry, I'd like to bring you here in here as well. But I mean, yes, I do some meditation, but you've given me a real inspiration to get out into the garden and do the meditation in the garden. I mean, obviously, as you say, one doesn't have to. Garry, does this resonate with you?
I connect. I'm a tree hugger. I connect with the earth. I connect with animals. I connect with human beings. Not forgetting human beings. I feel that connection, and when the breath slows down, it's a good thing. I usually work at 10,000 miles an hour, so yoga for me is very good, because there's movement, and then there's breathing, and then there's meditation, and everything. Gandhi quote to be everything is basically interconnected. To be a good son, you need to be a good father. To be a good dad, you need to be a good boss. And the earth works that way, in my opinion, my humble opinion. I loved your presentation. So you really connected with me, and I'm sure you did with many other people.
Now, Jenny, I know I'm a bit over-focused, but for people like me who are over-focused, then a way of implementing this, you know, within a sort of slightly less meditation way, is to break up the work into chunks. So what I like doing is to finish a chunk of work and then go and do the washing up, tidy up the kitchen, pop into the garden, do something else, and then allow my mind to sort of come up with things and then come back to the work. So this isn't what you're talking about. This isn't the full meditation you're talking about, and I think I would benefit from that. But it really does help. I do have some, you know, some work inspirations when I'm taking that break.
I think our brains work in different ways, and we can get stuck in just one way in which it operates. And if our mind is busy all the time, particularly in that rational way, which it needs to be, it's a great gift that we have it, but it gets tired, like anything that we overuse, like a muscle we overuse, and we tend to work in a very short-circuited way then. And if we want to think in new ways, or we want to bring in more aspects of ourselves, particularly to bring the rational and the feeling together, then taking a break, that's why often people going for a walk, or going up a mountain, or doing the washing up, or having a shower, people's best ideas come to them, because their brain goes through different channels, and that brings in an enrichment to the way that it was.
If I may, Jenny, I'm part of a close to 20,000 people community in Enfield. And one of the questions I've asked them is, what have they found that this lockdown has happened? How has it impacted them? They said they found a sense of freedom. Now, the rat race, you blink and it's Friday. And I think that if anything is going to come of this, people will start to appreciate their freedom and slow down, That's just my insight from what I've seen and the people that I'm connected with. I don't know if you found that. You're probably already quite connected already, but
well, I think it's interesting that if people go back to that pace of life at work, it's quite important to bring a sort of green corridor around that experience before you go back to join the people that you know, your family, the people you love, the people you share your home with. Maybe by having a 10-minute walk before you walk into your home, so that you change your pace, you change your attention, you deliberately put your attention not on your working day, but ideally on things of beauty around you, or maybe things that are challenging. You might be walking in the wind and the rain, but something that switches you out of that way of doing, or you're at risk of taking it back into your personal relationships. And for me, you talk about connection, I'm actually self-isolating, well, alone with my cat and my garden and my frogs, and that's fine. But for me to lean against a tree is actually, you know, it gives me a back rub. It's lovely. That feels like having a massage. And, you know, I'm not going to be having a massage for I don't know how many months. So that sense of touch in nature is certainly something that's become absolutely vital to me.
Can I ask you something controversial? There's those that are quite cynical and would call the conversation we're having quite woo-woo. And not in touch with reality, and then we would say, well, you're not in touch with reality actually. Because these are the average man on the street. These are the people that will start to, we need to move that movement closer to this argument. How do you propose to do that?
I think that this is why the current situation is so valuable, because people haven't really had the luxury of time to rethink what they're doing. And there's so many demands on people's attention. We know that the IT industry employs people who understand addiction to make sure that we don't break away. And most of that is about either getting advertising revenue or getting us to spend money. Well, actually, there's not much I can spend money on. I've got my groceries. So how about all those other things that we can do? And when we don't have to rush around because we're busy, we can actually just spend 20 minutes sat looking at our garden, or standing in the park, hearing the wind in the trees. I've been videoing just, you know, a few 30 seconds of the sound of Arnos Grove, the little glades there, and the birds to put on Facebook, because normally there's a lot of other background noise, and there's not. You hear the natural noise, and it's really beautiful.
Wow, so Jenny, that sounds special. That's a really different sort of video than the normal videos we're getting. So, well, what I'd ask you to do here now, you've given us a great description of how to go about the meditation. You've encouraged us to do the meditation outside in our garden, or some other garden, someone else's garden, public garden. And now you're talking about the video. If you are able, please, I really encourage you to put this together as some follow-up material that we can put out on the Facebook page about this, and also give us some links to your amazing calming videos. That's really exciting. So you know, Garry, we're sort of heading towards the end of this particular session now. If people have comments, do please put them, if you're on the Zoom call, put your comments into Zoom or into Facebook. Garry, you're getting some comments coming through on Facebook.
Tons of comments. Now, technically, the show must always go on. I've been furiously emailing the councillor over here, trying to send her. It's always amazing to know what goes on in the background. We've been emailing each other, trying to get the link. So,
Garry, hi.
Like a beautiful,
hi, Charles. Hi, Jenny.
Looks so graceful, and underneath there's lots going on. So thank you very much for joining us. You've come in just on time. Did you enjoy it? I hope you got to hear Jenny's talk. So wonderful.
Yeah, that's probably why I'm so calm.
Nice one.
You're as cool as a cucumber. Look, coming in 8 minutes.
So Jenny, thank you so much for joining us. Let's
My
just
pleasure.
give the opportunity to give your final comments or conclusions, a farewell to the to our live audience here. Do you want to just round off?
Yes, I think there's one thing that is actually in the paper I mentioned with lots of free resources of mindfulness, and that's a mindfulness caring for the planet that you can do with your family, and maybe sharing with members of your family that you can't be with, but you can do this practice together, saying that you care for them and that you care for the health and well-being of the planet. And I think that was a really nice thing to do with people that you love, and it shows that your compassion is spreading worldwide, exactly as Einstein encouraged us to do.
Do you want to just talk it through, or do you want to put that on the your write-up afterwards?
I can put it in the chat, but I think you know,
okay, if you put it together on a piece of paper and send it to us, and then we can put it in the Facebook notes we're going to send out. So just to let everyone know, we are going to send out some notes from each of the presenters who give us something, so you've got some follow-up. Okay, and also, of course, this will be recorded, which is being recorded. It'll be available as a follow-up. Thanks to, and Gary's going to work that piece for us. And also, there's still time to share this with other people who aren't part of this. So if you're online and able to share it on Facebook, you can actually just share this on Facebook. Gary, do you just want to help people with how to share it?
Yeah, of course. The link is very simple. You go to Facebook, you join, you must be watching this. So just all you do is you press the share button. That then gets shared to everybody that is your connection. Jenny, before you go, you speak a different language to most scientists. So if you were to connect with people that are not quite convinced that we have a tipping point and this is a real emergency, how would you succinctly say a change of habit maybe, or I don't want to put words in your mouth because you put things across so well. How do we motivate and empower others to think that this is time to change?
I think I'd ask people to think back maybe to their childhood and a time that they enjoyed being in nature. And depending on how old you are, you might be able to recognize the change sometimes in our climate. When I was a child, we had snow every winter, so I was always building a snowman. But to take that sort of joy of that time as a child and to think, how can we ensure that future generations have that joy as well? And that's going to take practical steps, the sort of steps that we've been talking about here today. But it also means we have to connect our hearts.
Jenny, I acknowledge you. You're a wonderful soul. You're a beautiful person. And not that everybody isn't, but certainly you connect with my side that's a little bit more the softer side, for sure. And I hope that message, you hear that loud and clear. We've heard that the forests have a tipping point. The the ice has a tipping point. We need to act quickly, and that's what today's about.
We do.
To make a better tomorrow, to make a better vision of tomorrow, and Charles is leading that, and it takes a community to make action. So we need lots of people to do this. So Jenny, all you need to do is unhook your screen, and wow. Very, very impressive talk. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Jenny. Thank you.
Thank you.
Donna, hello.
Hi, Charles.
So, Donna, is your Chris Joyce joining us?
He should be.
Gary, we need Chris Joyce, please, on the screen.
I'm working on it. I was just so pleased to see Donna.
He's multitasking.
Which
So Donna, thank you so much for joining us. Chris, we need your microphone on as well.
Any moment now. Look, we're running to time.
There we go. Is that working?
Chris, hi, great to see you. Thanks for joining us.
Comfortably sitting there watching.
Chris, you can if you haven't done this before, you can actually rename yourself. So you can rename yourself as part of RBWM if you'd like to do that. You just click your name on the screen. But the whole day today, the day is about to help people with what they can do about global warming. Right? It's all about that. Now, the value, Donna, of having yourself and Chris is that you are a big multiplier on this. I mean, the community that you represent has got 150,000 people. And so that's a much, much bigger community even than Garry has. I mean, Garry's community is not as big as that. So you've got a really, really big community. But let's just start off with a very simple question to each of you. So Donna, in this period of lockdown, what is it that you're doing differently than you haven't been doing before?
Oh my goodness, our world has changed immeasurably. Firstly, we are ploughing through with our normal activities. So you'll be pleased to know that we are continuing to write our climate change strategy, but more about that later. But
stealing my questions, Donna.
But the community has come together in a rather extraordinary way. We've got about 49 different hubs that are operating throughout the borough, and people are just helping each other and supporting the vulnerable people in the community. And it's just extraordinary to see. People are making meals for one another. They're making sure that the vulnerable people are looked after. And small little enterprises are growing. Obviously, with social distancing, it's tricky, but people are really making the best of it. There will be people who are in trouble, particularly with lockdown. You never really know, who's behind a door, and if there are families that are struggling where one person might be struggling. But children are going to school. Some of our vulnerable children are going to school, and the teachers there, the staff in the borough are doing extraordinary things. Obviously, our litter bins are still being emptied, and the services are continuing. So no, we're doing really well.
Would you like to promote?
We're pleased with ourselves.
Not everybody knows which borough you're from.
Chris and I are from the Royal Borough of Windsor and Maidenhead.
Okay, so Chris, same question for you. What are you doing differently, either work or work-wise or personally?
So certainly from my perspective, I have 3 children, 5 and under. So preventing them from joining these meetings is often good fun. And 2 dogs and 3 chickens. So we've got quite a full household for self-isolation, and we started 2 weeks before everyone else, unfortunately. But I think
with H1N1, I mean, I was away at the time, and we sort of suddenly I looked around and there was a chicken about 4 feet from me, and I thought, oh my goodness, am I going to catch this? So it's just as well, Chris, we're not in the time of H1N1. But if you'd like to get a child to bring a chicken in, then that would be a first for one of Garry's shows, wouldn't it, Garry?
I think
I love thinking out of the box, Charles. I think I'm rubbing off on you. I love that. My children are playing and I keep shooing them, be more quiet. So if any child wants to come in, then why not? They're tomorrow's future.
Yeah. I've locked myself in.
We'll just deal with it. Okay.
Is there any significant? Can I ask, Chris?
I was going to say though, professional. What's that?
The 2 pictures behind you. Any significance? Just
one is my sister-in-law on a horse, and the other one was a present that I bought for my partner during lockdown because I thought it was nice, because she's a big gardener and we like colourful, particularly kind of with the rainbow colours and the rainbows in our window at the moment. I thought it was an apt picture for now, and I thought I didn't really think it through before joining this call, but it's actually quite a good call, good one for this call. A bit of background. We've got some nature behind us. But what I would say in terms of professionally, what we're doing differently, I think it's something that people have talked about for a long time in terms of delivering transformation, and certainly as an organisation and as a borough, we've seen levels of transformation that would normally take years in the course of a number of weeks. And so the main focus I've got at the moment is how do we embed some of that change and lock in some of those benefits for the longer term, So we don't just fall back into the normal patterns by accident. So a lot of the work I'm doing at the moment is on our recovery plans, both as an organisation and in terms of borough-wide for the community and the economy.
Well, I'm sure people will be really pleased to hear about that, Chris. But now let's now turn to Donna and ask you the question. You've got this really key role in heading up climate change activities for the borough. So basically, you know, I know you're passionate about it, but just give us just tell our audience a little bit about why you are so passionate about climate change.
I've got a bit of a guilty conscience about where I am right now, and interesting linking back to Jenny. You know, we've made a bit of a mess of this planet, and I feel that I need to clean it up and play my part in cleaning it up. I've got 5 children, 3 of which I grew from scratch, and 2 that I fortunately inherited along the way, and a grandchild. And I just think each of us has to play a part, and in this position I can have a little bit more influence and do a little bit more than I might otherwise be.
Okay. All right. Well, turning to wider things then. As people on the call will probably know, the UK Parliament declared a climate and environmental emergency. I think it was on the 1st of May 2019. There's something like 300 plus local authorities in England alone, plus those in Scotland, Wales and Northern Ireland. So for our viewers, it'd be good if you could give us an outline of really what is the role of local authorities generally in tackling climate change.
I mean, Chris will definitely fill me in on this, but and I'm a relatively new councillor. I was only elected last May and took over the role in about October or so. As cabinet lead for this and as well for environmental services and parks and countryside. But it's quite sporadic. Some councils have moved quite quickly. We were encouraged to do so by a group called the Climate Emergency Coalition, which is led by some very competent people in our borough. And I'm glad that we have, because we've got some very competent officers, and we've got some very good stakeholders in our community. And so we're pushing forward on this. But it really is up to the individual councils, and over half of them now have declared this climate emergency, and some are doing them quickly and some are doing them slowly. So the government hasn't actually declared any legislation saying you have to. So it's really up to us.
So I know, Donna, that you've been to talk to and you've talked with quite a number of other local authorities. So this is for you and for Chris. So of these other local authorities, are there some that who are doing things that you really like?
Yeah, I was quite probably end of February with about 30 different cabinet leads in my exact position from all over the country. And, you know, this is something that we haven't done before as councillors. This is not run-of-the-mill normal council stuff. Declaring a climate emergency and then getting to carbon neutral by whether it's 2028 or 2050 is a new thing for us. And a lot of people don't realise that it's on top of everything else that councils typically deliver to their residents. So the local authority, the GLA has got courses for us. So there were 30 of us. It was so fascinating to see that some were doing very well in some areas and some in others. No one really had the story and the full story or doing the full package. But yes, they are. You know, I mean, Leeds have got a really catchy Leeds by example. They're doing some wonderful community-based work. Manchester are doing some great stuff with their infrastructure. Nottingham, are racing to become the first. So they've got their businesses involved as well as the people and the councils. But again, you know, there are lots of little silos and no one doing everything perfectly. It's interesting to be involved. Okay.
Yeah.
But Chris,
Chris, what about you? What are your thoughts? Are you familiar with these, or are there some others that you'd like to call out? I
think certainly in Oxfordshire they're doing a lot of good stuff around energy and their low carbon energy hub. And Nottingham would be one I'd pull out in terms of the work they've been doing for a number of years with local buses. and actually in terms of they're one of the really success stories where most other parts of the country bus demand has been falling, but actually they've successfully managed to build that in alongside their tram system as well. So transport wise, I say Nottingham would be one I'd point to, but I think local authorities have got that middleman kind of role. So you know, everyone, if we're going to get to net zero, everyone's got to play their part. Everyone from central government through local authorities to community groups to private individuals, and actually we're not going to get to net zero unless everyone plays their role. And I think the particular role of local authorities is to make sure the pressure is being kept up on central government around funding and the things that only they can do, but also to be a facilitator, a champion of local community groups and as a means of promoting the right sorts of activities that their residents can take up to do their part. So I think we've all got a role to play. Local authorities have got a real role as a champion of making sure that in both directions, upwards and downwards, we're making sure that everyone's doing their part.
Yeah, I agree, Chris, with this. I think your model of the role of central government, local government, organisations, businesses, individuals is all really, really important if we're going to get something done. And from experience I've had before, I think it's particularly important that from your local authority organisations are putting pressure on government to say, look, what you need to do to deliver this effectively, what you need in terms of their support. But going back to these examples that you've called out, and thank you both for that. Do any of these offer a full or partial template for what you might like to do in Windsor and Maidenhead? Donna.
So we had quite a unique approach in terms of how we set about formulating our strategy. We started with our residents and asked them first what their vision was for 20 years hence and 50 years hence. And we've developed our strategy that way. We've obviously checked it out with best practice. And so we will have looked at examples of other organizations, but it's largely going to be residents and key stakeholders within the community delivering it. So why not ask those people? And besides, we're such a lean council, you know, we're a low tax council, we're a lean council. We haven't got lots of surplus people, officers running around able to do this for us. So that was the way that we went about it. So we had lots of very experienced, it turned out that within our borough, we've got some real stars who just happen to be residents, but we've got great skills in all those areas. And so that's how we started ours. So very different, I think, from how a lot of people have.
You are very lucky because I've met some of these stars, to be honest. Yeah, but let's take a look first of all before we get into more of the details. Let's just take a look at the numbers, and this might be something that we need Chris to help with. So the UK government, I think it was in June 2019, set the target of for the UK of net zero by 2050. So this is a massive change from where we are now, a massive reduction in CO2 emissions across all areas. So Chris or Donna, do you want to just talk through, do you have a target number for Windsor and Maidenhead in this?
So I think the council, almost immediately after the government declared its position, declared the environmental and climate emergency, and it set out a number of commitments. The first one was to extend our targets around energy reduction of the council itself. So we'd already delivered a 21% reduction in energy use across the council, and set out a new 4-year energy and water strategy to further reduce that by 10% in the next 4 years. We have committed to developing the strategy for net zero and bringing that back to council by June. So I don't want to release information before it's been signed off internally, sure. but obviously what we'll be setting out as part of that is a trajectory that we'll be measuring ourselves against on an annual basis, both from the council's emissions perspective, so our actual operations that we directly control, but also from a borough-wide perspective. And I think we'll be looking at that trajectory from a from an aspirational point of view of saying, you know, assuming the straight line, can we beat that, and effectively tracking ourselves on an annual basis to see whether we're ahead or behind that curve.
Okay, so we're talking about, Chris, we're talking about net zero by 2050, is that right? Is that the plan?
Yeah.
And then you've mentioned the words, you mentioned the phrase straight line as well. So basically you're aspirationally, you're hoping to achieve straight line reduction from now to 2050.
I think that's the trajectory we'll measure ourselves against in terms of seeing how quickly we are reducing our emissions. Inevitably, it won't be a straight line because certain technology changes will provide a step change, but we'll use that as the basis for tracking and effectively resetting our action plans around that. So if we're behind the curve, we'll want to understand why and where we are relative to the rest of the UK as well in terms of performance, to understand if we're over or underperforming. Because I think that's the basis by which we can judge ourselves.
I mean, the net zero by 2050, there's a lot of people were very pleased with that when it came out. It meant that there was a target. Other people said, well, look, that's still way too far off. I think my point of view on this is that I just feel psychologically 2050 is such a long way away. You know, we're used to shorter targets. I mean, you know, a target for 2025, a target for 2030. This is, I feel, much more motivating. So basically, can we sort of convert your straight line into some targets for shorter term targets for 2025, 2030?
Yeah, they'll be set out in the strategy, and we're also, as part of the strategy, so our strategy will be to 2050, but we'll have a 5-year action plan. So what we'll be able to do is track on an annual basis the council's emissions, the borough-wide emissions, but also our progress against delivering that action plan. And I think it's really important that we're able to set out not just the outcomes that we want, but also demonstrating we're delivering what we say we will.
Now, like a lot of councils, I know that Windsor and Maidenhead have got plans for a lot more housing, and you've got the development of Maidenhead, all this sort of thing. So what are we saying here, Chris? Are we saying that are we talking about these reductions to net zero, which include the fact that anyway, you're going to have a lot more housing, a lot more people in the area? Is that all included in this calculation, or is that extra?
Yeah, no, I think if we're going to reach net zero, we've got to have zero carbon lifestyles. So whether there are 10 people or 100 people, the target is the same. So we need to find ways to build in, you know, zero carbon lifestyles in that timeline. So the growth, but I think actually the growth provides a real opportunity. So for example, where we're regenerating large parts of land in southwest Maidenhead, it's an opportunity to build in low carbon approaches to transport, to infrastructure, to buildings from the start, and I think they provide real opportunities to trial new and different things that are much more difficult to retrofit as well.
Okay, so like we said earlier, you know, I think a lot of people were very pleased that the Windsor and Maidenhead declared the climate and environmental emergency, which I think was back in June 2019. So I think what would be good is really to if you're able, please, one or both of you, to give us an update around really what's been happening since then, what is happening. Chris, I think you indicated a plan going to council for agreement at the end of June. So if you can give us an update, that would be very helpful, I think.
Should I go first? You can fill in the gaps. I'm very nervous of graphs, I have to tell you. Charles, I showed Mrs. May one recently and she pointed out all the errors I made. So I tend to stay clear of them. Anyway, yeah, so we initially involved a large group of people, and we continue to do that through several workshops. And there are 4 key areas where we are working on. There's something called the circular economy. Obviously, that's around how one is sustainable and how you reduce waste and try and build as much sustainability into the system as you can. The renewable energy, so how do we rely less on fossil fuels and more on electricity and heat source and other things like that. The natural capital, obviously, what can we do to use our natural world more, and how can we have more trees and rewild if possible in some areas, and sustainable mobility, which is all around how we travel. And yeah, so those are the 4 areas where we have got a series of incredibly exciting strategies coming through. And those are going to be discussed with various stakeholders and members of the council and cabinet within the next 3 or 4 weeks.
Okay, so between you, is there any of those initiatives that you'd like to share with us to inspire people around what's happening? Is there anything that any of your particular favourites?
I'll jump in and just say a little bit more on the process. Just Donna's been chairing a cross-party working group that's been developing this strategy, which I think is really important, because in the political landscape we need to have buy-in cross-party to this, and it's been a really interesting process to be part of, and the stakeholder engagement we've done to build up the kind of key elements of the strategy and define those broad themes has been interesting. From the perspective of taking this forward, obviously we had been holding public meetings, which is now not possible. So we're seeking to engage with some of the key stakeholders and groups over the next few weeks to test out before taking it through our formal governance process, effectively to cabinet, and then to full council in June. In terms of things that excite me, so from my perspective, having a kind of transport background and an infrastructure background, I think the idea of this being the trigger for us developing a new local transport plan, which will give us a chance to set out a low carbon future for our transport plans, I think is particularly exciting from my perspective. But also, I think that the piece that's really interested me is been delving into with some of our experts around how we can build some more work around natural capital. So I think it's an area where it goes slightly beyond just the climate and carbon agenda, and it's an opportunity to do something and deliver on what the government set out in terms of the 25-year environmental plan. So going broader than just reducing carbon emissions, actually, how do we utilise those natural assets in a better way? Because Windsor and Maidenhead is one of those places where we have the kind of best of both worlds. We have a really strong economy and great opportunities for people, but we also have, substantial natural assets as well.
Oh,
he's gone.
A change of host. Oh, he's back.
How hard it is as a councillor. It's a thankless task sometimes, and it's really tricky, and you put in so much hard work. When I think of what's achievable if we really put our minds to it, remember the recycling? I remember thinking nobody will do that, and within a couple of years we've got people to separate their recycling. That's amazing. So when you come up against barriers, do you find that the environment is not sexy and not a vote winner? Do you come up against things that you find difficult, or because it's music to my ears what you're both saying?
I remember Michael Gove once saying that the environment was the one thing that would get young kids to switch parties.
How long ago was that?
I don't know, 3 or 4 years.
Wow.
But no, the environment's amazing. It just attracts all sorts of fabulous people to it. But so is waste. Waste is exciting. I mean, look at what we're doing. If we can change, at the moment they're using plastic bottles to fuel hydrogen. I mean, they are. Yeah, I mean, they
use the plastic bottles to build houses. It's amazing.
Yeah, I mean, Garry, you can take anything and make it exciting. I mean, particularly in a sustainable economy. I mean, we can do so much more. Well, maybe not anything, but most things.
I agree. I absolutely agree that when we bring things back to nature, it's very, very exciting.
Yeah, I mean, the thing is not to waste. If we can say to people, think before you buy, think before you use, think before you do.
It certainly saddened me that we spent an extra £1 billion on food through the first week of lockdown, and nearly £500,000 of food was thrown away. Like, that's just so wasteful. Sustainability, Charles and I don't know if you've watched Charles's journey, but he's interviewed many people, and sustainability was very interesting for me, that particular show. That there was a lady and she was so proud she had the same jumper for 20 years and it looked new, it looked great. Sometimes we think, oh, those shoes, I've had them too long, why reheal them? It's a disposable society we live in. And the council, you're lacking funds. If we can save money by being more sustainable, there's certainly something there.
But one of the things I found is that we don't have a lot of resources, but it's made us so much more smarter, so much smarter as we've developed our plan. I mean, we will be going out, anyone out there want to give us money, that would be great, but we will be going out looking for it. But we've had to really think hard as we've developed our climate change strategy. And, you know, we don't want to waste a cent. So we're being very careful as we think about it.
And with parks and trees and cutting down trees, that again, that's something some councils find it cheaper to cut down a tree than maintain it and then put a new one upon it. That really breaks my heart when I see that.
Well, fortunately my portfolio also includes parks and countryside.
Great.
So it's fine.
Chris, you've got young children.
I do, yes.
Yeah. What more joyous thing than them climbing a tree or running in the park? And that's the responsibility that we have on our shoulders.
I think particularly my 3-year-olds have particularly enjoyed being able to recognise primrose.
Garry, I don't know if anybody else is getting this, but
no, just Charles. He'll be back. You were just saying, sorry, Chris.
So I was going to say they're particularly excited about.
Garry, I'm getting a sign.
It's time to refresh your computer. If you press F5 or F6, it will refresh everything for you, Charles. Over to you, Chris.
I was going to say they're particularly excited about the fact that they can now recognise primroses. And that's part of our local walks. We've been walking around our village, and certainly they've enjoyed learning things as we go. We have a bug hotel in our garden, which is incredibly enjoyable, which is really good. Obviously they enjoy looking after the chickens, but I mean, to me, that they really love being outside, and they love the time getting out.
That whole 10-year, we've only got a 10-year till the cliff edge, and some people say sooner. For me, it would be educating our 7-year-olds and our 10-year-olds. So they do care passionately about that. My 7-year-old's classroom is called Primrose, actually, and I think that starts with that and enjoying nature. Charles, are you back? Who knows? This is one of the reasons why we plan to go on for a long time. We're not going to finish until nearly 9:30, and then as the live stream goes on, it becomes more buggy. So after this, there'll be a new link. Chris, you were speaking in mid-flow. Please let me not take. Do you remember what your thread of thought?
I was going to say I have no idea. I mean, certainly a big driving force behind kind of my passion for this area. If only not, what's the point of being here if we don't change the world? But I think certainly having 3 young children, knowing that if we haven't done our best as part of this process. But I think what's really, really important though is that we don't fixate on one issue. We need to build this into everything that we're doing. So it can't just be there is sustainability and climate action, and then there is the economy, and then there is society, and then it's got to be integrated, and we've got to do it in a way that makes people want to be involved. So I think where we're building proposals that will try and save the council money, or will try and help people to have a better quality of life, because if we're not doing that, then people won't buy into it, because the sorts of people that will be listening to this conversation and be involved are those that are passionately bought into it, but actually we've got to bring everyone else with us. Otherwise the change won't happen.
That's why we ask for people to like, share and comment. I hope that it goes out of not just the scientific community and not the people that are tree huggers and not the people that care about the environment, but actually to your everyday person, because it affects everybody. Somebody said today that in London, if you live in London or the UK, it doesn't really affect you so much. But if you live in the Amazon, live in South America, you live in even the States, the climate is affecting them all the time.
But I'm from Norfolk originally, and it will affect us here in the UK. You know, you start to lose large parts of landmass if the seas start rising and those sorts of things. So I think we have to recognise that we need to look at, you know, what things we've done during this lockdown period, what we've enjoyed. You know, you've seen people kind of reconnecting with their communities, reconnecting with their families, reconnecting with things that we probably used to do, and perhaps we need to capture some of that spirit too.
Yeah,
it's so refreshing to see politicians so passionate, because in the general election, everybody threw, both the left and the right, threw a lot of money in their manifestos. That didn't go unmissed, really. The press didn't make a big deal of it, in my opinion, of how much of a vote swinger they thought it was going to be. But I hope the movement gets stronger and stronger. And you both seem so community minded, because that's how this is going to win.
Yeah. One of the things that's happened is that people have slowed down, and I think people have had a chance to think. So people are walking now to the shop, and they're just taking their time over stuff and probably enjoying each other's company more. So I'm wondering what they're cutting out in order to achieve this new way of doing things.
Probably driving to work.
Well, how many times have I heard, I don't really want to go back? Like a rat race, if you live in London, months can feel like weeks. You blink and then Friday's there again. And I think we haven't mentioned really mental health at all, but I know for sure that there are 9 out of 10, there's studies have shown 9 out of 10 people don't like their job. If we're in lockdown now, and then you're connecting with your children and you're connecting with the parks, and I'm hoping that people will go from stockbroker to gardener, and they'll make just as much if they're passionate about that.
Yeah.
Charles, Charles, are you good? I'm worried about you, sir.
If you can hear me, is it my connection or what?
Yeah, we're almost at the end now.
Tell me what I need to do. Can I do anything technically?
Yeah, you can jump out and then jump back in. That would work. We've only got 15 minutes left of this particular slot. Were there things that you
want? What can I do? Can I do anything, Garry, about the link? Because it's not working too well.
No, you're coming through loud and clear now. Okay.
All right. Well, let me ask the question then. Sorry, I lost a little bit of time there, but people are worried about the borough local plan. Okay, people are worried that the 300 comments made about it, and people are worried that the borough local plan was resubmitted in October 2019 with virtually nothing in it about the council's commitment to climate change. And the importance of this, as I know from my own experience, is that if developers are given any leeway around, the wording of what they're supposed to do, if it says it should be appropriate rather than you must, then basically there's the scope for developers putting in new buildings which basically don't meet the climate requirements. So question for one of you, which I've been asked to ask you, is basically, does the resubmitted borough local plan, does it make commitments to climate change?
Should I start with that? Okay. I'm not a planner. I was chair of the planning panel for a short period of time, and I know that the submitted borough local plan was not accepted by everybody. And what we chose to do, or what the planning chose to do, was to submit it rather than create a new plan, because creating a new plan would have taken several years. And we have a large regeneration program that is in place. And in Maidenhead, I think it's something like 10,000. No, I did write it down somewhere. I have it. But we have several thousand homes to build over a very short period of time. And a lot of them are social housing. So to rip up an existing plan, because it did have some climate change and biodiversity in it, but at the time it didn't have an enormous amount, would in their minds have been something that wasn't, they weren't comfortable with doing. So the plan was stretched as far as it could be, the existing plan, with additional climate change and biodiversity factors added into it. And it was quite comprehensive to the extent that the inspector, it seems, was comfortable with it. And what we were going to do then was, as soon as it was ready, we were going to then put an SPD with climate change and biodiversity, it's a climate change and biodiversity SPD on top of that. So that was the solution. But to actually start again with we don't have a large planning policy staff, and to start again from scratch, we just thought would not be sensible given the amount of people that we had and the amount of time it would take to do it.
I think sorry, Chris, after you.
I think it's really important to note from a planning perspective, having no plan in place, no adopted plan, is a worse situation, because then you can get inappropriate development coming forward that isn't consistent with sustainable development in the same way as perhaps through the plan. I think Donna's absolutely right that once we've got an adopted plan with the right spatial strategy in, there's nothing to stop us building additional policies on top through supplementary planning documents, and that actually is a strong approach, and that will be informed from our climate strategy rather than and there has been several additions as well from a climate and sustainability perspectives in the policies of the local plan, a specific policies on climate change, additional policies around green space allocations. So there's a lot of work going on, and I think one of the things that doing the work on the climate strategy has highlighted to me is a lot of this work is already happening in the borough, and a lot of really good things are already being done that are supporting our approach towards net zero. But what the climate strategy has given is a focus to bring it all together and give a kind of coherent narrative alongside it. But a lot of really good work is already happening.
What we are doing, though, with our climate change strategy is we are embedding it throughout the council. So it's not just an area that, say, that one particular area will have. It's going to be embedded through waste, and it will be embedded through planning. And all of those areas will be involved in climate change, right from the top to the bottom. And people will be trained and people will be involved. And so there won't be a stone left unturned. So I hope that answers your question, but neither of us are in planning. So that's as good as I can give. Oh, he's gone again, Chris. Should we ask each other the questions?
They've all frozen. It's just you and I now.
Yeah. I don't know. Do you think that answered the question? Oh, here he's back again. Garry.
Okay. Well,
interviewing each other is a lovely thing.
I'm sorry, my line keeping dropping out, whatever. But I think what people want to hear is you've explained the mechanism of the borough local plan with the supplementary planning documents. I think what people want to hear is people want the assurance that whatever mechanism you use basically will give a very high level of compliance and protection. Because in my experience, as soon as any wording is allowed, the developers find a way to change things. Unless there's wording in it there that says that they must comply with some standards on insulation, on low CO2 heating, whatever it is, then people will find a way of wiggling out. So I think what people want to hear is, have we got some good level of assurance that the plan that you're following will mean that new buildings actually are very fully climate compliant? That's the bottom line.
I'd like to take this one. So we have a recently elected leader and a new administration from May, and then a new leader. And we have been incredibly transparent with what we're doing and exposed vulnerabilities that we have within our council and within our administration, and we will continue to do so because we have to be upfront with our residents. We're a small borough, and we have got a lot of work to do. And between the councillors and the officers, we work quite seamlessly. There's no reason to hide anything, and there's no way that we're going to say we're going to get to 2050 and carbon neutral by 2050 and try and sort of slide into base without doing it. It's not something we can hide away from. Okay. We are going to deliver as we say, and I'd be very sad to lose any of those stakeholders because they didn't believe in us.
So the other thing I'd add is that much of the development that's happening, particularly in the Maidenhead area, is something that's been driven through our joint venture partnerships as well. So much of it is being led jointly through the council. So, you know, it's not just what the developers say and what's happening there. It's, you know, it's being driven through the work the council is doing. So it's embedded in our approach, and therefore, if we're adopting a climate strategy, we're going to have to build that into the work that we're doing across the whole council.
Okay, I think just the other question that people would like an answer to is that obviously you've done an amazing job of involving 100+ volunteers from the community to help with the climate plan. With coronavirus, obviously face-to-face meetings not possible. I think these people, questions I'm getting, they're very concerned that they want to be involved and contributing and consulting, even though there's a lockdown. And so basically, what can you say about those people being involved, so that something doesn't happen in June, a decision by the council where basically people feel that they've been excluded from this?
So the strategy that we've come up with is the strategy from those people. So I think when they look at it, they will recognize that they are written, you know, their names are all over it.
Okay.
Theoretically speaking, they might not have said how long it will take and how much carbon will come out of it, and how long, you know, and how much it will cost. But I bet their bottom dollars that in every single action, they will recognize their names because they developed it.
Okay, and so can they be involved in reviewing it before the council makes a decision?
Chris?
So we're going to be doing some engagement ahead of the decisions being made by the council. But I'd also say that what the council will be doing is signing off the draft strategy with a view to, this isn't the final answer that says this is everything we're going to do to 2050. This is a starting point, and therefore actually the hard work begins after that in terms of getting on and delivering it. So we'll be engaging with the community, not just in the development of the plan, but in the delivery of it, because they're going to have a really critical role in getting it done. And there'll be opportunities to engage as we start to monitor, you know, performance and delivery. So I don't see this as we're going to write a strategy and then we're going to shut up shop till 2050 and see what happens. This is an ongoing process, and so people will be able to be engaged. But I would say that not everyone is going to look at everything in the strategy and say that's exactly what I would have done.
Okay.
You know,
but you'll never have that.
Charles, everybody, as we edge towards the last 5 minutes, I just want to consider something you haven't considered, is charity shops. They recycle many items. Fashion happens to be the second biggest polluter out of everything. So how are we helping our charity shops? Because certainly in the borough that I live in Enfield, they're thriving by going online. They're selling things online. They're gonna find it difficult to come back with rent. They still have rent to pay. Most of them have volunteers. But anyway, in the last couple of minutes, have you a strategy for our poor charity shops?
So we were on a call today actually talking about our what we're going to do with our nurseries that are in that same predicament, our flower nurseries, not our baby nurseries. But yes, certainly in the circular economy, we are definitely looking at all of those types of businesses and how we can ensure that the circularity and not wasting is absolutely number one on our agenda. And that's a really good idea, selling online. I don't know if ours are doing that. I haven't checked, but
right.
Yeah, but that's fantastic. And
Facebook,
we will look
you
at
can
it.
do wonderful things for free.
Yeah.
I'm going to love you and leave you. I've enjoyed your speak. I've got technical things to do, so I'm going to hand you over to Charles, acknowledge you both for the hard work you do. And it's tough being a politician. You get a lot of abuse. And I acknowledge you that it's not easy. Not everybody understands that. So I've very much enjoyed your
Thank you.
Charles, I'll see you on the other side, sir.
Okay, thank you. So thank you very much, Donna. Thank you, Chris, for your contributions. I know that what you're saying will be very closely watched in the local community. Yeah, so that's very good. And I really have to apologise to everybody online for the poor connection that we had in much of this. We did lose some time through a poor connection. Interestingly, now Gary's dropped out. We seem to have a better connection, weirdly. So maybe it was all down to Gary.
It was definitely
So,
Garry.
But thank you to you both again for joining us. What I would encourage you to do is to, if you'd like to put together some notes around some aspects of this, then they can go out as notes following the discussion. Obviously, it's up to you what you put in those. I'm not going to do any notes, so they will be official notes of what you, the two of you, would like to say about what you had to say to us in our online discussion. But if you'd like to do that, then we can link that to the notice of your meeting and your presence here. But thank you very, very much. And everybody stay safe, and please do everything you can for the 150,000 people that you represent in our amazing community. So thank you very much for that.
Thanks, Charles. Thanks for the time.
Thank you.
Bye.
Okay, so for everybody watching online, we are closing down this link. I was hoping that Garry was going to say this. We're going to close down this link, and we're going to reopen, Gary's going to reopen a new link. So we proceed with the new link. Garry, you're back. So do you want to tell everybody about the links and what's happening? Garry, you're on mute.
I think the first half was a real success, Charles. You put some strategically brilliant people together. I've got some good news for you, that the No CO2 Facebook page has reached over 200 likes. So that's a milestone.
Okay, so Garry, is this just you and I at the moment? No, we're live on Facebook.
We're about to close this broadcast down. And then in 2 minutes time, it will be a brand new broadcast, but it will still be on the No CO2 page. Yeah. So there you go. I'll see you on the other